Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Yountville Town Council meeting for Tuesday, March 1st, 2016. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll move on to roll call, please.
Councilmember Moeller. Here. Councilmember Durham. Here. Councilmember Dornbecker. Here. Vice Mayor Hall.
Here.
Mayor Dunbar.
Here. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next up is the adoption of tonight's agenda, and I know we do have one item that is going to be removed. Julie, did you want to just state that?
Item 8A under presentations will be removed due to the presenter's illness.
Okay, thank you. With that change, is there a motion to adopt tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Next up is a proclamation we have tonight. I don't believe we have a representative here to receive it, but I do want to recognize that we are proclaiming March 1st, 2016 as Arbor Day, and we can prove it because we have this proclamation right here. So, and we will be presenting that to the proper authorities. Next up, public comment. Now would be the time to speak on anything that's not on tonight's agenda. We will be getting to individual comments from the public as we handle other agenda items. Seeing no one move forward, we'll move right ahead to our consent calendar. We have items 7A, B, and C on the consent calendar. Is there any discussion or action?
I move that we adopt and approve the items on the consent calendar.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That is unanimously passed. Thank you very much. We have removed item 8A, so we're going to get right to our public hearing, item 9A, which involves, I think, almost everyone in the audience, discussing Marin Clean Energy and potential ordinance.
Great.
Let's start with the staff report. Nathan.
Great, thank you. So, before you tonight is a resolution and an ordinance about the town of Yountville electing to join the Marin Clean Energy Program. As all of you are aware, the town of Yountville was approached by representatives of Sustainable Napa County quite a bit ago about participating in a CCA program managed by Marin Clean Energy, MCE from here on out. MCE had previously made several presentations to the town council as well as to the council-appointed Go Green team regarding this participation in the program. Just to review, MCE is a public, not-for-profit electricity provider that gives all current PG&E customers the choice of having 50% to 100% of their electricity supplies be derived from renewable resources such as solar, wind, bioenergy, or others. On August 4th, 2015, representatives from MCE gave a presentation to the town council, and that presentation resulted in the town council authorizing town staff to send MCE a letter of interest. A similar letter was sent from the other Napa County municipalities, excluding the county. The county has been part of MCE for a while now. In September, the town received a response from that letter informing them that the board of MCE had approved a 6-month inclusion period that would allow no-cost membership consideration if Yountville completed the application. This application includes the resolution that is before you this evening, the ordinance, as well as some other items that I'll touch on. Now, the town council directed staff to have both representatives from PG&E as well as MCE present to the Go Green team in order to develop a comparison of the two services. During its January regular meeting, the Go Green team received presentations from both organizations, and following the presentations, the Go Green team was still enthusiastic about recommending membership in MCE. Now, the town's consultant for our climate action plan, Ms. Christine O'Rourke, also provided a nice matrix comparing the two organizations, and that has been attached to the staff report and is before you this evening. Now, just to kind of summarize some of the info on that matrix, you'll see on it an emission factor. Emission factor is a measure of the pounds of carbon dioxide emitted into the atmosphere for every kilowatt hour produced when generating electricity. Electricity generated from fossil fuels such as natural gas or coal, they both emit carbon dioxide. While other sources like hydropower, wind, solar, those are considered GHG free, meaning they are carbon free, not carbon. The electricity that MCE and PG&E provides comes from a mix of these sources. Eligible, also on the matrix, you'll see eligible renewable sources. That refers to those electricity sources that qualify for the California Renewable Portfolio Standard. That includes solar, wind, small hydroelectric, landfill gas, and biomass. There are larger hydropower and nuclear energy that are GHG free, but they don't qualify for that portfolio. That's why it's separated there on the matrix. All utilities need to provide electricity with a minimum of 33% eligible renewable energy sources by the year 2020 and 50% by 2050. Now also on the matrix, you can see that unbundled RECs refer to unbundled renewable energy certificates. I'll try and provide a little summary of what that is here, but we also have people here that can answer the questions. To help facilitate the sale of renewable electricity nationally, a standard industry-wide system has been established that separates renewable electricity generation into two parts. First, the electricity or electrical energy produced by a renewable generator, and two, the renewable attributes of that generation. The renewable attributes can be sold separately as RECs. The electricity that was split from the REC is no longer considered renewable and cannot be counted as renewable or zero emission by whomever purchases it. The MCE's board has set a goal to reduce unbundled RECs to 15% of the portfolio by the year 2015 and to 3% by 2016 to 2024. We don't have 2015's data yet, so that's why it may have seemed like this is an old report. No. So the matrix shows MCE's electricity is both its light green customers and deep green customers combined, has had a lower GHG emission factor than PG&E over the last 5 years, as well as higher eligible renewable energy and GHG-free content. And so you'll see PG&E is currently projecting 37% of its power content to be eligible renewable and 78% will be GHG-free by 2020. Whereas MCE has set a goal to provide light green power content that is 80% renewable and 95% GHG-free by 2025. Deep green electricity, as you know, is 100% GHG-free, which any customer would be able to elect to say, I want to be deep green. Now back to that application, the things the town needs to do in order to be part of this, to fulfill all of MCE's requirements. First, we need to adopt the resolution that is before you this evening, adopt an ordinance, which is required by the Public Utilities Code, which is also attached. And that resolution also authorizes the town manager to execute the memorandum of understanding and also gives the town manager the authorization to sign the request for load data from PG&E, which is all the things that MCE needs. And lastly, the town will need to designate a staff person to serve as a liaison to MCE, which we'll do. With that, I'm here to answer any questions. If there are more technical questions, I will punt to those behind me. We have our consultant, Christina O'Rourke, from Christina O'Rourke Community Planning, as well as representatives from MCE here to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Questions of the staff report? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and, actually, I do have one, Nathan, I think you can handle. One of the things that we're required is to provide office space and...
Correct. And we do have the facilities able to allow that.
And we have somebody designated, am I guessing that's you? Or we don't know
Probably,
yet?
sure. No, that doesn't seem like an issue. We'll have a staff
But
member.
is there any concern about the number of hours that would be required to
At this point, no.
be a liaison? Okay. With that, I'll open the public hearing and invite either our representatives from MCE or any other members of the public to come up. So if there's anything else you'd like to add, or are you good? Here for questions only? Okay. Any other members of the public want to address this issue? Trying to set a record for our public hearings, I guess. I'll close the public hearing and return the discussion to the council. Who would like to begin? Our Go Green representatives?
Yes.
Councilmember Dornbecker?
Yes, we've had a hearing here before us. We've had a hearing with the Go Green team, and the Go Green team, I want to commend the members of the Go Green team and Christine O'Rourke for leading a very healthy discussion about all of the issues around this issue. And in my estimation, and in addition to the fact that it is an opt-out program, so people do have a choice. If they choose to stay with PG&E, they can do so. We would hope that everybody would want to be part of MCE and go 100%, but whatever we do will be an improvement. So I'm in great support of this, actually.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Yes, I want to thank all the parties involved, obviously, and town staff. One of the things that we set out to do as a community when we evaluated our greenhouse gas emissions these many years ago, and Councilmember Moeller and Councilmember Dornbecker were participatory in that, was to establish a baseline by which we were going to try to reduce our current and future emissions by a certain standard. And one major step that we can take in accomplishing that is by taking this step to move forward with a greener energy service provider, or, if you will, utility provider. The service and the utilities will still be delivered through PG&E, so there's really not a question about how you will receive your energy. The power lines are not going to move and be replaced by new ones. It's just the opportunity, and again, it's an opportunity because the choice is the individuals, whether or not they choose to participate with MCE for their power purchasing or their utilization. They can continue, as mentioned by Councilmember Dornbecker, to purchase through PG&E should they decide, or they can go this greener route. And we've gone through a process by which we've interviewed PG&E and MCE now twice about what these options are for us, and I believe it's the right choice for this community to at least have the option to go with a greener energy produced for us in this entire town. And so I trust that the balance of the council will support that approach, and that we can hopefully move this thing forward and give the residents of the town of Yountville the option to choose this green source. Thank you.
Other comments? Councilmember Durham?
I'm sorry, maybe I was confused, but who do I ask questions to then?
Well, this is our time for deliberation, but if you need to ask staff
So
for
maybe, yeah.
clarification, you can
I
do
was
that.
just I wanted to clarify why exactly this was chosen over PG&E.
Well, you can ask that of our Go Green representatives, or
Yeah,
Nathan could
okay.
also address it.
Either one.
If either of you feel comfortable in responding.
I'll respond, and that is, just recently I've seen an article, an announcement from PG&E announcing that they have just reached a point where they are providing 30% reusable energy, and they were touting that as a, an advantage for the communities. To me, I really would like to see, what I like about the MCE is that not only is there the ability to have 100% GHG-free energy, but the money that they collect also goes towards engendering new projects to create reusable energy and sustainable energy. So in terms of why we decided to choose it, those are two very valuable reasons for me.
Good.
I would just, again, point to the current consumption/comparison matrix that was presented. We weren't provided a plethora of alternatives, but I don't think there's a significant number of those that are out there. Today in this community, and not that we need to be like the remainder of our community. In fact, I have prided ourselves on the fact that we've held ourselves out to be unique and pioneering. We're one of the last to jump on the train here to go after and utilize green energy. And MCE is an alternative that has been provided to us. And for a negligible change in someone's individual rates, and there's no one wants to take on more cost, but what we're doing is we're making an investment into the future, and that's the way I considered it. And so the PG&E alternative, if people choose not to go that route, they'll still have the option to purchase with them through PG&E. Really, this is just providing that additional choice. All the power is still being carried to the same line, and if in the future, although I don't recall specifically how long these contracts exist for, but I think you could consider other alternatives 5, 10, 20 years down the line, should they be available to us. We don't know, or there may be batteries on our homes that don't require that we buy purchase power from anybody, that we can generate it ourselves. And I think those alternatives exist as well as solar power that people are implementing and otherwise. This is just giving the residents of this community a choice as far as how they want to purchase the power and the source of that power that they're purchasing.
And it's an opt-out, so we have to say we don't want it.
Correct.
Or we get it automatically, correct?
Yes, the level that is, so, correct, it's an opt-out. So you're automatically enrolled in it unless there is such an opt-out by the individual. And my understanding, and maybe I'm not the right person to ask this question.
I appreciate your comments.
But my understanding was that there is a 4 to 5 month period where there is continuous communication, and obviously we know our town staff will be involved if there are questions from the residents about what the opt-out process is and what it means. Because this is a potential opportunity for our residents. We shouldn't be so naive to think there won't be a potential impact of people not understanding what it is they're getting into.
It's actually 6 months.
6 months, pardon me. I was being conservative.
We were also one of the last groups to jump on the plastic bag ban as well, so we're blazing trails with green energy here in Yountville. So, dare I ask about unbundled RECs with you?
Not with myself. I don't know if Councilmember Dornbecker can answer that question.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's
That's
all right.
pretty technical.
I know a lot
That's
about
right.
them. I could
Is this,
help.
are we okay to have this discussion?
We can certainly have it with the council, and if we have
Okay.
to ask for clarification from staff, but that's as far as we should go. But if
Okay.
Councilmember Mueller can speak to that.
That'd be great.
So what unbundled RECs are renewable energy certificates. And basically, if you have a wind farm, you have green energy, obviously, because that falls within the state definition, and you have a renewable energy certificate. And if you decide, if you own this wind farm, that you have the right to actually sell your certificate. So your certificate is a piece of paper, and it has all the numbers associated with the greenness of your wind farm. So companies, the CCAs, can actually, as well as PG&E, buy those pieces of paper. They don't make, and when they do that, they become unbundled. They're no longer associated with the energy. So they're just pieces of paper, and you're allowed to then use the numbers on those pieces of papers to kind of count towards your renewable energy and your greenhouse gas emissions when you put together charts and put things on your website. So you didn't ask for my opinion, but to me it's green laundering of energy. So, but that's what they are.
Okay.
It is actually one of the, I think, intentionally complicated elements to this
I know.
whole thing.
I know, I've been reading about
The
it more
terms
than I
used and the
planned.
descriptions associated with those terms seem intentionally, I don't want to say misleading, but complicated.
And so that's why as I tried to educate myself today, got a little confused and wanted to make sure that I'm clear, because I did call Allison, and she did say that 2015 number of 15% unbundled RECs should be met this year. And I'm sorry, I don't know which one's Allison. Thank you. So that was encouraging. But then the next, what I got confused about in the information that I read is that these unbundled RECs are used to help with financing as well. So to be able to build up to where they are today. So to get down, my confusion was, it turns out, who's paying for it to get down? Is it Marin Clean Energy through the ratepayers, or is it them bringing on more solar sites, more wind sites, stuff like that? Just so I understand it correctly.
I think the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Very good. So,
See, clear as,
that's fine. And I just wanted to, because I was not part of the discussion with PG&E, with the Go Green team, so I just wanted to make sure that I'm at least understanding what I'm either going to opt out of or stay into as well. And the more I researched it today, I got a little confused. So, thank you.
and I think that's a very legitimate point, that we're going to need to encourage all of our residents to clarify it to their own level of satisfaction, because it is a complicated dynamic, and the industry, like I said, my personal opinion, has not done us any favors with the terminology, and when you see percentages going down and you're being told it's a good thing, and it's a little bit complicated to understand, we're trying to, reduce emissions, but increase the level of renewable energy, it gets a little bit complicated, but certainly in the League of California Cities has analyzed this numerous times. Our North Bay Division has had multiple conversations about it, and on top of the Go Green team's analysis, I feel comfortable with moving forward with providing this option. But I do think it's really important for our residents to make sure they understand what it is we're offering them to participate in. But I do think that the end result is a very positive thing, which is using more renewable energy.
Thank you. Thank
Do you
you.
have any additional comments?
Well, I mean, I have real concerns about these unbundled renewable energy certificates. I like reality. I don't really like, promises and pieces of paper. I mean, if they, truly ever get there, I think I would be supportive. But, right now, I really want to see something that really gives me a compelling reason to say, I'm switching everybody in my community from PG&E to a different company because of these unbundled RECs. They're pieces of paper. There's no underlying green energy to those. So when you back all this out of these calculations, I mean, you've got two equivalent companies here. There might be a couple different percentages between the renewable energy and the greenhouse gases between the two. So I need a compelling reason to say I'm moving my community towards this, because specifically of these unbundled RECs definitely tell me this is not the numbers associated that you look at in this chart and compare it with PG&E. They don't add up when you're just using pieces of paper to generate those numbers. So,
May I ask a question?
I just wanted to clarify one thing before I go back to you, that we're not requiring the community to do anything. As the Vice Mayor made I think, clear, that we're providing an opportunity for them to opt in or opt out. I think that's a very critical difference, that if we were obligating them to move forward, I could understand your point more than we're providing them an option that they themselves can choose if they are comfortable with it, or they can opt out of it and stay, as you're talking about.
well,
with the
that's my
existing
concern,
service.
is they are automatically opted in, so they truly have to opt out. And I don't want to say our community isn't paying attention, but, I can tell you, as we all know, you can send out lots of information, and there will still be quite a few people that don't really know that this happens. I mean, we try a lot with communication, and I think that there's certainly a communication plan here. But so that's my concern, that maybe a year from now, when, well, they're not really, when the numbers are, when the RECs go down and the numbers are truly there to justify it, then I'd be comfortable with it.
Okay, Councilmember Dornbecker?
Well, I wanted to ask Councilmember Moeller, if the wind farm, using your example, does sell their certificate, that doesn't mean that they've stopped producing the wind energy, however. Is that correct?
Yes, but for example, Marine Clean Energy buys just the piece of paper. Marine Clean Energy does not have to buy the wind. If they do, it's no longer, if Marine Clean Energy buys the piece of paper and the wind, it's a bundled REC. It's not unbundled. That's what makes it unbundled.
I see.
Is they just can sell pieces of paper. And the wind farm makes a little extra money by selling those pieces of paper.
I see. So
That's
that
why
means
they
that
do
automatically
it.
they wouldn't buy the wind from that wind farm.
Well, if they did, it would be
Not
bundled.
necessarily.
Not
The- the-
necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
The rec would be bundled with the energy. So when it's called an unbundled rec, it's totally separate, because that wind farm can do whatever it wants. It may not need to sell green energy to somebody, or it may be using it itself. It could, be lots of reasons that they're willing to unbundle the energy and the certificate that they get with that energy.
I understand. Thank you.
But just to further that comment, it's not unlike cap and trade in that those that are producing dirty energy are buying the credits from those that are producing clean energy. Hence, you still get clean energy or cleaner energy.
Well, cap and trade's actually quite different, because
But what they're doing is they're stripping the value of the green and selling it to someone who's applying it to their basket of goods that they're qualifying as being green.
Well, no, they're not, they're not trying to qualify anything as green. What happens with cap and trade, there's somebody who has to produce a widget.
Right.
And the only way, well, they probably could with a lot more technology, make that widget is to, spew a lot of greenhouse gases out or something like that. So what they can do, they can start, doing technology that decreases it or not. So with the cap and trade, if they can't do that, they pay.
Right.
And then those monies can go to other things that the cap and trade's money go to, which goes to transportation and all sorts of
I
stuff.
think a comparison that might be more favorable is an in-lieu fee, that you're not
Right.
necessarily, we see it in housing, we see it in
We do
other
it here.
other ways, that you don't see somebody actually building affordable housing, but you're paying into an in-lieu fee that will ultimately result in affordable housing.
Assuming
I see it
there's
as a
land.
similar way,
Right.
that you may not be receiving the actual cleaner energy from somebody that has a certificate, but you are providing support and in the way of funding so that additional clean energy can be produced.
Right.
So it's kind of like they're buying into, and by the way, it makes them look better
Right,
when they're buying the attributes.
right.
Is there any further council discussion?
Nope, I'm done.
With that being said, I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 16-3327, requesting membership in Marine Clean Energy,
And I'll second.
And you're waiving the reading. Correct.
and waiving the reading, excuse
Thank
me.
you.
Second.
From Vice Mayor. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
So we have Councilmember Moeller opposed. That's a 4-1, which means that does pass. So we've introduced and waived the reading of that ordinance, and we will have that ordinance come back for a second and final consideration in a future meeting. Thank
And
you. Yes, Councilmember Moeller? I mean, Dornbecker?
based on the belief I have that as things evolve, things will get clearer, and Marine Clean Energy will continue to bring those certificates down. I am moving that we approve ordinance number 16-448, approving the Marine Clean Energy Joint Powers Agreement and authorizing the implementation of a community choice aggregation program and waiving the reading.
I'll second.
Any further discussion about that? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
That motion also passes with a 4-1 vote with Councilmember Moeller in opposition. I think that takes care of the business of that item. So, thank you all for attending on that with us. We're going to move on to our first administrative regular item, receiving an update of the said Go Green team and all of its accomplishments.
All right. Thank you. As you know, on March 17th of last year, the Yountville Town Council approved Resolution 153248, which established the Go Green team and appointed 5 new members to serve on this new advisory board. The 5 members are Janet Claire Gotch, Billy Hewitt, Sherry Bredigan, Alyssa Wickstrom, and Davio Santos. The team meets every month along with the 2 members of the Council Greenhouse Gas Ad Hoc Committee, Member Dornbecker and Member Hall. Coordinating the meetings is our consultant, Christine O'Rourke of Christine O'Rourke Community Planning, who has been tasked with developing this climate action plan for the town. Ms. O'Rourke has a presentation to share with you all this evening, giving a little update of all of the great things the Go Green team has done over this past year. Before we hand the television screen over to Christine, though, I will say that this item does have action associated with it. The original term of office for the Go Green team members was to end on March 18th, 2016. However, in order to adequately review the finalized climate action plan and to provide a good recommendation to the town council, the terms need to be extended. And so at the last Go Green team meeting, staff asked the members present if they were willing to continue to serve, and they indicated that they would be pleased to stay involved until the climate action plan is complete and presented to the town council. So the resolution that you have here this evening is to extend the term 6 more months. It would expire in September.
So let's just be clear, 3 of the terms are expiring.
No, 3 people were present at the Go Green team meeting, but the resolution is to extend all 5 terms.
So don't we typically stagger?
This is a unique situation in the sense that this was a short term, not a standing.
Okay.
So when we did it, you initially appointed everybody for what we anticipated was a 1 year. So it is very different in terms of how you structured it than the typical Park and Rec ZDRB, our Arts Commission appointment.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Was there anything more, Nathan, that you wanted to present before we
I'm
go
here.
to the screen?
It's if you have questions for me.
Questions of the report? No, I think we're
All right.
ready to move forward.
We'll get you the mouse. There we go.
Good evening, Mayor Dunbar, members of the council. I'm Christine O'Rourke, and I am the town's consultant on the Climate Action Plan. And tonight, I'd like to give you an update on the progress that we've been making on the plan over the past year. As Nathan said, the council appointed our Go Green team a year ago, last March, and we have 5 terrific members. 3 of them are in the audience. Yes, and I'd like them to just kind of stand up and take a bow. We have Janet
It's half the audience if you do that. We know who they are.
We know who they
Davio
are.
Santos, okay, and Sherry Bright again. We also have Billy Hewitt and Alyssa Wickstrom. They've been really great to work with. They're very enthusiastic and ask great questions and have a great perspective also on what's going to work for the town, which is really important. We have been meeting monthly since April, and we're meeting with our town council liaisons with Vice Mayor Hall and Council Member Dornbecker, who've also been great to work with. And we began with a review of our greenhouse gas emissions inventories. You have 2 inventories that were done for your baseline emission year of 2010, one for the community emissions and one for the government operations emissions. And while we were reviewing them, we noticed a few inconsistencies, so we wanted to go back and clean up some of those things. One was that we wanted to make sure that we were only attributing emissions that are created within the town's town limits, and we wanted to exclude the emissions from the veterans' home. So we took care of that. And then there was another adjustment we wanted to make so that agricultural emissions were more accurately apportioned to the county, to Napa County, and not to the town. So we made some adjustments to those greenhouse gas emissions inventories. The next thing that we did was the Go Green team reaffirmed the goal that the town council had adopted when you adopted those greenhouse gas inventories originally, to reduce emissions to 20% below the baseline emissions of 2010 by the year 2020. And that goal is very much in line with the statewide goal, which is to reduce emissions to 1990 levels by 2020. We don't have exact data on what towns and cities were doing in 1990, so we use an approximate goal. And so the Go Green team reaffirmed that goal. The next thing we did was we looked at a variety of state actions that are going to reduce emissions in the town of Yountville. And these emissions range from the Renewable Portfolio Standard, which we were just talking a little bit about. That increases the renewable content of electricity over time. There are also actions that are related to transportation emissions. Those are things like increasing fuel efficiency for vehicles over time, encouraging new zero or low emission vehicles like electric vehicles. Also, actions to improve the building efficiency through continual updates to the state green building code. So we looked at all of those actions and did kind of a quick quantification to see what that would do to emissions in Yountville, and we found that would reduce emissions about 10% by the year 2020. So what we need then are local actions to make up the remaining 10%. And the Go Green team was very enthusiastic and said we can make this goal, so that's what we are focusing on now. So over the past 10 months or so, we've been taking each meeting each month to focus on specific study areas. The first one was in transportation, and for this one we met with some representatives from the Napa Valley Transportation Authority, and we talked to them about all of the transit they have, the bus, the Vine bus system, the Yountville trolley, about a bunch of different programs they have available to get people to either carpool or vanpool or bike or walk to work. And there's the Yountville trolley. We also talked about bike and pedestrian improvements, those that are happening throughout the county, but also what the town of Yountville is doing, including the Vine Trail. And we talked about electric vehicles and how to encourage more ownership of EVs and specifically charging stations. How are we going to get more charging stations, both in the town and through the town's actions, but also on private property and in our residents' homes and again throughout the county, so that there's a really viable charging station, that's charging infrastructure that supports the EV vehicles. The next study area was water and wastewater, and we started this one with a tour of the wastewater treatment plant. We talked to the staff over there about the town's efforts to recycle water. The town is recycling 83% of the water, and that water is going to the golf course and to a few wineries. Also, the energy generations that's happening there, where they're taking the methane and using that in the operations rather than purchasing natural gas from PG&E. We also looked at water-efficient fixtures and landscapes and talked about ways that the town can encourage residents and business owners to either install more water-efficient fixtures and landscapes. And we also looked at green building code that could either be a mandate to make those changes. The next area was energy efficiency and renewable energy. And for this one, we started off with a tour of Bardesano. Bardesano is a LEED Platinum hotel, or one of the very few in the country, and they had a lot of very innovative green features in that hotel in order to reduce energy consumption. They also have solar PV array on the hotel. Then when we came back here, we met with Sustainable Napa County to talk about the energy efficiency programs that they have available to businesses. We talked about energy efficient lighting and appliances, both what residents and business owners can do and what the town is doing, such as converting incandescent and regular streetlights to LED streetlights. We looked at solar energy and what solar energy adoption rates are now and what we can do to improve that. And we also talked about PACE financing programs. Those are property assessed clean energy financing programs, and that allows property owners to borrow money in order to do energy efficient projects like upgrades or install a renewable energy system like a PV system on their home or business, and then pay that back with their property on their property tax bill. And then finally, we talked about Marin Clean Energy, which we've already discussed tonight, but we looked at how that could be a very good source of or program to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Yountville. Our next area was waste, and you can probably see a pattern here. We like to take tours, and so we went and we had a tour of the Clover Flat landfill, and we also visited the Resource Recovery Center. And there we learned about the methane capture project that they have going on, where they're taking the methane that is generated from the decomposition of waste in the landfill, and then they use that and they sell that energy to PG&E. So it's a really great way to capture that methane. We talked about composting and recycling programs, what the town can do to encourage residents to increase their recycling rates and do either home composting or perhaps to team with Upper Valley Waste Disposal and provide composting so that residents and property, their customers, can put their kitchen waste in with the green can, and then that would be composted. And finally, we looked at construction and demolition debris diversion and what the town can do to improve those rates. Finally, we had one meeting devoted to public outreach, and for this meeting, we met with a nonprofit group called Resilient Neighborhoods. They're active down in Marin County, and what they do is they form these eco teams, which are comprised of 5 to 7 households, and they meet over 5 weeks, and they kind of do what we did. They do an inventory of a personal household inventory of what the carbon footprint is for that household, and talked about all the different ways that that household can reduce their energy use and water consumption and just generally reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And then the households make pledges. They either do some actions during the program or make pledges to do other actions like purchase an electric vehicle or install a solar PV system on their house, and then they quantify those. So it's a really great model and something that could potentially be replicated here in Napa County. And then we also talked about climate action plan outreach, because that's a really important part of the plan. We don't want to have a plan that's just going to sit on a shelf. We want something that is going to inspire people to take action, to motivate them, and something that is really has a lot of doable action so that the town and this town staff can move forward with implementing this plan. We also, at the request of the town council, talked about some other topics that weren't initially on our plate. We talked about joining the Compact of Mayors, which is an international agreement for cities and towns to do a greenhouse gas inventory and adopt a climate action plan. We talked about Marin Clean Energy, as you know, and the Go Green team did recommend that the council move forward with that, as well as the plastic bag ban, which the team recommended adoption of the plastic bag ban. So tonight, we're going to tell you what we're going to do going forward. Our next big thing is our community workshop, which we have scheduled for Saturday, April 30th from 2 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's just the week after Earth Day, thank you. So we thought that was an appropriate timing for our workshop, and it's going to be in the gymnasium at the community center. And we're really excited. We're going to have a lot of tables set up with stations on all of these different study areas, and we'll have a presentation. We're going to have, what we want to do is get feedback on all of our draft actions that we're considering including in the climate action plan. So it's really important that we get that community input so we have, again, actions that the community is comfortable with and is on board with implementing. And we also want to provide information on actions that the community members can take now. So we'll have information on rebates and how to install a PV system and how to do a laundry to landscape system, and we'll have all kinds of information for people at those tables. We will have refreshments Vice Mayor Hall has generously offered to provide some wine. So we'll have wine and cheese for the adults and cookies and juice for the children. We're going to have prizes for people who come and either bike or walk to our community workshop. We'll have prizes for people who give us our feedback at all of the different stations. And we're going to have a game called Climate in Jeopardy, which will be a really fun way to wrap up the day, test everyone's knowledge on the information that's been given out at the different stations. So it should be a really fun day, encouraging everybody to come. Again, that's Saturday, April 30th from 2 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So you've already identified the key to getting people's participation is
We
food and wine.
We talked long and hard about that one, yes.
Questions of the presentation?
I have a
Councilmember Moeller?
I have a comment. I just wanted to, I'm on the Upper Valley Waste Management Board, and I saw in some of your, in the documents that you were talking about recycling in general. I just wanted to give you kind of some information and maybe a suggestion. Currently, the state mandate for 2020 is 75%. Napa County, which we're all part of, we're pretty much at 73%, so we're really not too worried about making that target. We're doing pretty well. And we talk about this quite a bit in Sacramento and within our board, and really trying to get significantly, above 75% compliance is really going to take tremendous amounts of energy and all that. What I'd like to suggest, because you also mentioned it, was the organics, because one of the other things that I attended a big workshop on, a lot of the issue with the recyclings is the bottom is really falling out of the recycling market with oil dropping down. China's not buying any of this stuff. But something we really can make inroads with is organics recycling. And that's something that the waste management company is going to do, and we'll be talking about that and getting information out, so your help with that. Because about a third of what we have a brown can, so everyone knows what a brown can is here in Yountville, is food waste. And starting, I think, April 1, it's mandatory that food waste, and we've been doing this quite a while already, be recycled by all the businesses. So I think, some of that you should get some credits for. I mean, it's not a big portion like transportation and some of that other stuff, but there is, and we've had it for well over a year, mandatory recycling of food waste for our businesses, and we are getting ready to do that for residential too. And that, I think, is going to really add a lot to, because those food waste or anaerobic fermentation, they produce methane, and getting those in the green waste, and we're going to be probably looking at some new funding for some grinders so we can really grind up the food with the green waste. So we have aerobic versus anaerobic fermentation going on. So anyways, and I wouldn't mind if you guys, came up with a policy that for increasing organic waste diversion that I could take to our board, and that way we could also find out, is the community willing to sustain increases in the rates for all the new equipment we're going to have to purchase, so that we can grind up the food with the green waste, so we can prevent the methane. So if you have any ideas on, policies you want to bring forward that would help with some of the boards we're on, especially waste, I'd be open to that.
Okay, yes, and that's absolutely something that we're including in the climate action plan, and will also be at the community workshop. I believe at one of the stations we have questions about if they're in support of doing that kind of composting, and also if they would compost at home. I mean, if that household on their own would participate in that as well.
Well, but home composting does generate methane, so I think you have to deal with that. I mean, if you put it in your trash and we grind it up and mix it with, non-anaerobic fermentation of like grass, you don't get as much. So
Okay.
Christy can help you with all that too.
Okay, terrific. Yes, we will pursue that.
Any other questions?
I have one.
Vice Mayor?
So I have a different location for the event. Has it been moved?
The community center.
Okay, great.
That was
Just confirming, because I,
What do
Yeah,
you
don't
think it
wanna
was?
mi- you don't wanna
I thought it
miss
was
that-
here.
Don't miss the delivery.
They told me here, everyone else is going to the community center, but I'm leaving the wine with them.
That was a recent change that we
So
want to surprise you
I
with.
do want to make sure that the members of our climate action, or our Go Green team that are present are here to support the idea of their terms being extended. Good. If any of you'd like to comment, I invite anybody that's present to come forward. If not, we'll go ahead and move forward. Yeah, please. So Councilmember Molar didn't want to make sure, I want to make sure she didn't scare anybody off with adding the additional methane capture homework assignment. So anyway, go ahead.
My name is Davio Santos, and I guess one of the things that I'm most interested in is just trying to make a small difference. And I think that climate change in general gets really politicized. It can be a very dividing point amongst a lot of different viewpoints. But one thing I think that's really practical and important is that we try to do something. And so one of the reasons that I'm on this committee is because I feel that every time we try to make a step forward, there are a lot of disadvantaged notions out there that seem to prevent us from really making significant strides in the direction that will allow this earth to continue way beyond our time here. So one of the things that I feel really compelled to do, and I'll be doing with Sherry, is we're going to be going next door to the elementary school in a few weeks, and we're going to be talking to the kids about Earth Day, about what is the climate and what can they do about it. Because at least in my mind, the only way we're really going to succeed here, we're not going to make the changes with a green team or in Yountville or in Napa County or anywhere, because this is a worldwide phenomenon. If you look at pictures from Beijing or Mumbai and see the dreaded pollution there, I mean, it's just staggering that that's going on right now as I'm speaking. So why I feel compelled to be on this committee and why I think it's important is because we have to have the ability to teach our children that their future depends on some of the small things they can do. So one of the ideas that we kicked around on our committee was to go to the school and talk to some of the teachers, but certainly the kids, and say, you know, what does Earth Day mean to you? Draw us a picture. Tell us about it. And we'll incorporate that into our workshop. So without trying to get on a grandstand role about this committee, I just think it's really cool that this town is invested at least trying to make those small changes. If you try to change the whole world with Teslas, it's going to be a little hard unless you have a lot of Tesla money to make it all work. But if you take an LED light, you're at least making a difference. So if we can do that in this town, if we can reach our community that way, whether it's through a workshop or whether it's through just the council making the decisions that at least gives the town the option or the information necessary to move in a direction that will keep this planet sustainable, then I'm all for it. So, thanks.
Great.
Well
Thank
said.
you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah. All right. And to that point, I'll just very quickly say, we don't want you to be waiting for direction from us on topics that we want you to consider. We want you to be proactive as you have been and bring us ideas as you collectively work together, thinking of different ways that maybe we haven't thought of. So, I commend all of you on doing that already and continuing to do that for at least 6 more months, we think. Any other members of either the team or the public?
Well, I
Any
just
further discussion? Yes, Councilmember
would like
Dorn-Becker.
to commend once again the team, and Christine has been a wonderful leader and moderator and direction pointer for us, and corralling us as we try to head off in 8 different directions. But it's been a really interesting and educational process. So I thank you. I'm happy to be a part of it.
I second that, and it's really nice to work with people in our community who have all taken time out of their busy schedules and are willing to commit additional time. So again, thank you to our residents and our community, our ad hoc members, and Christine for her support. And unless there's other commentary, I'll make a motion to at least keep these things moving along.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I would like to say one last thing, and that is also a thank you to our terrific staff members who have, Nathan and Sandra, who have been so great about facilitating it all for us, too. Thank you.
Okay.
Vice Mayor?
Now I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 163325, extending the term dates for the 5 members of the Go Green team to September 18, 2016.
I'll second that.
And before they have an opportunity to change their minds, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. And just as an aside, I think to the point of our ad hoc representatives, sometimes we have committees that it takes us a little while to get people's interest and get participation and find people that are really dedicated. This Go Green team, it was immediate, the response that we got and the participation you've all given. It's been very impressive. So we're happy to extend and glad that you're all willing to have the continuity to continue doing all the good work. So thank you all very much on all of our behalf. And we're still talking green. The next item up for discussion, let's keep talking about greenhouse gas emissions.
All right. A lot was touched on that last item, so I'll be brief. As you know, November 5th, 2013, the Town Council approved the 2010 Community Inventory of GHG Emissions, and that's what recognized 2010 as the baseline year, established the revised reduction target of 20% by the year 2020. And then later, in January 2014, Town Council approved a similar inventory regarding government operations. So 2 different inventories. One is community-wide, one is just government operations. As Mr. O'Rourke mentioned previously, once we started work on our climate action plan, that was really put into place in order to meet those reduction targets. We noticed some inconsistencies with those numbers, and so during the peer review, O'Rourke found several errors that requires a few modifications. All are outlined in the staff report as well as the attached memo. Most of these numbers, though, are calculations, so you can see how our actions can directly affect these numbers that are shown here. These are new figures that are going to be influenced, I guess, by the goals and plans made in our climate action plan. And so with that, again, I'm here to answer any questions, and Mr. O'Rourke is also available to give any extra detail if you have questions about these modifications.
First one I want to ask, Nathan, the revisions, some of them are significant. Were these typos, or were these actually accurate emissions from 49,306 to 3,146?
I'll let Christine
example.
Go into more detail with those, but I believe a lot of it was with the underlying formula that was used.
So which one in particular?
I'm on
are you talking
the
about?
first page of the report talking about revisions to the local government operations inventory report, and it says the corrections of these figures as follows. And in 3 of the 4 cases presented, there were dramatic reductions in numbers.
Yeah,
I was trying to figure.
And those were in gallons. I believe that was in the gallons of fuel that was consumed. And I don't know why there was that, why that was inaccurately reported, but the emissions had been calculated correctly. So there was just an error in transferring over those numbers.
This is just correcting data that's being used
That
to.
didn't change the greenhouse gas emissions that were emitted in the local government inventory.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Maybe we'll have you stay right there before,
here.
in case there are other questions. Are there any other questions about the report as presented?
Nope.
I knew if I asked you to stay up there wouldn't be any questions.
Okay.
So thank you for that. Any members of the public like to comment on this report? Seeing none, I'll invite further discussion or action by the council. Any further conversation? Councilmember Dornbecker?
I will make a motion to approve resolution number 16-3326, approving the revised 2010 Community Inventory of Greenhouse Gas Emissions and the revised 2010 Local Government Operations Greenhouse Gas Emissions Inventory.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
That is unanimous. That is approved. Okay, we have one more. Now let's talk solar.
All right, and then I'll stop talking. So, before you tonight is a resolution that would authorize the town manager to execute an estoppel certificate and solar power purchase agreement amendment to the solar PV project with SolEd Benefit Corporation. And we also have representatives from SolEd here to answer any questions if those come. As you know, during its September 16th, 2014 meeting, the Town Council adopted a resolution that authorized the town manager to approve this power purchase agreement, or a PPA, with SolEd Benefit Corporation. The agreement was part of the installation of solar panels at the wastewater treatment plant, the pump station, as well as the community center. Now, the staff report from that was shared with you along with this one. Now, during that meeting, it was expected that construction would begin in the spring of 2015. However, SolEd Benefit Corporation unfortunately had a changing in financing partners in the last year, and that resulted in a delay in the project. Now, with the new financing partner firmly in place, the project is ready to proceed. However, an amendment to the current agreement is necessary. Though the seed agreement was approved in September of 2014, the funding partner lost staff in April, and in May of the same year, SolEd secured the new commitment for financing 100% of the projects, including all of Yountville's. In July of 2015, SolEd shared with the town of Yountville and all the other seed participating municipalities and organizations an amendment to the original agreement that the new financing party considered necessary. There was a little bit of back and forth to making sure that the amendment, the finance department added some language that the town was uncomfortable with. We were able to talk and remove the language that made both parties happy. So now, after various versions of the designs and sizes of the panel layouts across town, the design to be installed is the same as the original one that the council approved and saw in 2014. SolEd has provided an updated savings analysis report, which is also attached. The report shows total expected savings of $2.2 million over 25 years, with savings increasing each year. Consistent with the model approved by the council in 2014, the PPA payment increases slightly each year until the year 15, after 15 years of the agreement, and then it will decrease every following year until year 25. Though most of the underlying data in the analysis is the same, you'll notice some increases in system size, and that's a result of more up-to-date usage data that we've given them over the past year, particularly in the wastewater treatment plant. So overall, savings continue to be significant if the town council elects to continue with this project. Furthermore, the installation of solar panels would also go towards these climate action goals that we've been talking about this evening. So the attached resolution authorizes the town manager to sign this requested estoppel and contract amendment. So staff is here to answer any questions, as well as a representative from SolEd.
Okay, thank you.
Just one brief thing I want to add to the conversation is, as you know, we'll be doing our utility rate study for the next 5-year cycle. So this does have a potential impact on utility rates, because if we're able to understand and know that we're going to project a constant rate on our utility generation, that will have an impact on. So this program, for the most part, significantly is going to benefit the utility ratepayers in Yountville, because most of our operations are at the wastewater treatment plant and the corporation yard. So it does have some broader implications that I just wanted to share.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Mueller?
Can you just remind me, I'm just looking at this chart, so we're projecting 2.3 million in savings year 21. So how much does it cost for all these? I know we approved it, but I don't have that on top of my head. What does it cost, including maintenance for that 20 years? I just want to look at the differential.
Would you like a member from
Let's-
SolEd to
well,
answer it,
before-
or do you
Yeah,
want to?
we're going to ask you first, Nathan, and then
Okay.
when we get to that, then we'll invite you up to, if you can either just remember or jot down some of these.
Or go like this.
There are annual payments as part of the PPA. We do not own any of it, and so.
No, I understand all the financing stuff. I'm just trying to simply get a difference. We're going to save this much, it's going to cost this much. So
Right. On the second to last page of the comparisons where it shows all the savings and kind of the escalation table for all of the sites, it shows the total payments as well as the total savings. We would be paying over the 25 years in PPA payments, $2.1 million.
That's a wash. Right.
okay, thanks.
Councilmember Durham, did you have any?
That was my question. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Yeah. Councilmember Dornbecker?
Will you please remind me, because I was just about the plan for the community center, and these are going to be erected in the parking lot and also provide shade, is that correct? Excellent. Thank you.
We're using cell phones.
No more, more or less than normal, so.
That might be the question.
Any questions at this point?
No, not at this time,
Okay,
thank you.
so I think that's it for right now, because the question I have has to do with how are we so sure? I think the term you used is firmly in place. We thought we were firmly in place a year ago, so I'll invite our representative to address that. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
Mayor Dunbar and members of the council, thank you very, very much for allowing me to be here today. By the way, I come from a community that is tonight wrestling for the first time with a climate action plan, and there are 2 or 3 of the 5 members of the council in Corte Madera that are not so clearly in favor of doing one at all. And I'm really sorry that I'm not there and wrestling with them at present. We also haven't adopted a plastic bag ban. We also don't have electric vehicle charging stations as you do right here in front of the community. Although we have been in MCE, we were the last community in Marin to join MCE, in the Joint Powers Authority. And I am one of the 2% of the population that is a deep green meter owner.
Just state your name as well.
For the record, David Kuhnhart, President and CEO of Solide Benefit Corp. And when I was last here in September of 14, we tried to make it very clear that once we had all agencies in the SEED program signed, we would then turn to solidifying the construction numbers and solidifying the commitment from financing. And yes, indeed, we had somebody that was fabulous by November, and by April they were starting to unravel for complicated reasons that I won't bore you with. But by May, we found a new partner who has executed with us. We have built 5 schools, 4 of them with this particular party called C2SSG, and we built 4 schools, solar systems in East Petaluma in the old Adobe Union School District, and those are all up and running, and everything was paid for, and there are no liens, and we even corrected a deed that was for 40 years in error in one of those schools. So everything is as expected. We also have completed a private school up in Santa Rosa with a different funding partner. As to why do we think this is real, well, we've actually closed on the financing for all of the sites remaining in the SEED bundle, including the 3 sites within Yountville. So they are eager and only subject to the execution of that estoppel. That's the only subject to at this point. Also, we have signed with Danlin Corporation, a solar firm in San Rafael, who was actually mentioned in our original documents as the likely builder, as being the full builder of all of these. So we have a signed contract, and we're confident of the price to build. We're confident of the party who is available and a part of us now to fund 100% of the cost. So that's why it's now ready to go. I have other things to say, but I don't want to bore you, and this has gone so nicely and smoothly that I'm at risk of overselling.
Okay.
So.
Fair enough. Are there specific questions that the council has? I have one related to project timeline. You've talked about having all of your seed parties lined up. You have financing for all of those projects. How are you projecting the rollout of these projects, and how does it affect us here in Yountville?
Excellent question, and it's really it's almost a one-by-one answer. Right now, we're talking tomorrow with the DPW in Mill Valley, for example, and we have already given them a schedule for when we're starting, when we're going to be on the roof, when we're going to be in the parking lot, and seeing how that all rolls out and meshes with their park and rec calendar and so forth. Similarly, we're talking with the Marinwood CSD about their schedule and exactly how it rolls out next Tuesday. We're talking with Cloverdale tomorrow. So we're rolling out each one as just as soon as they sign and we're ready to go. There's very little else to be done with the power purchase agreement. One of the things that Stephen Rogers has insisted on is that we make no changes except those that are absolutely necessary. And so there's very little left on the lawyer front, if you will. Really nothing to negotiate other than finishing the signing of this estoppel. And so we do have final counts of materials and so forth, and we can incorporate those into the final, let's say, amended version of the PPA that has already been agreed to. And as soon as we get that estoppel, then we can authorize Danlin and their engineers to give us a schedule, which will map out everything and where it falls. One piece of the schedule that I would personally promise to go along with is to be here on Saturday, April 30th, to help explain to the public what the heck this solar is and what it might look like, so we can have some pretty pictures and so forth.
Great, thank you. Seeing no other questions for you, I appreciate your being here and providing that information. If anything else technical or legal comes up that you can help with, that'd be great.
I can tell you about Rex.
Okay.
Actually, you guys have bargained to keep all of the environmental attributes of this solar. So you get the Rex, and the best thing you can do if you want to be as green as possible is just retire them. Just put them in the drawer, put them in and lock them up, and then you have truly gone green, and you can take all the full bragging rights of doing that. We're not keeping them, and in California, they're generally not really financeable anyway. In some other states, they are very financeable. In Massachusetts and in Maryland and in New Jersey, they're very financeable because they're much more closely connected to the load-serving entity's benefits. So they pay for them in real dollars because it's a real benefit. But it is, you're largely right, mostly a secondary market paper kind of transaction. But you get to keep those here. And if I could answer something that you don't expect me to answer at all, your comment, Member Mueller, is absolutely spot on with respect to recycling the organic waste. And in Marin, the Marin Carbon Project is making huge progress in actually showing how one can sequester carbon from the air, not just avoid the carbon of greenhouse gas generation by having clean energy, but pull it out of the air and put it into the root structures of rangelands when you spread properly composted material around. Compost is a rare material. It is going to be more valuable, and it's going to be incredibly valuable just as soon as other people catch on to what
We're already sold out, so you can't buy any more. We're trying to make more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public like to address this issue? Seeing no one else, invite further discussion or potential action by the council. Councilmember Dornbecker,
Well, I'm ready to make a motion.
is there any further discussion? Proceed, please.
I move that we approve resolution number 16-3328, authorizing the town manager to execute the estoppel certificate and solar power purchase agreement amendment for the solar photovoltaic PV projects on 3 town sites, including the Yountville wastewater treatment plant, the Yountville Community Center, and the Yountville Pump Station with Sol Ed Benefit Corporation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nathan.
And now we turn to our slightly
Don't do
different-
it. Don't make that. No, I was about to say we're not going to make any green bad pun jokes
It's a
here.
green theme meeting.
almost
We are
St.
going
Patrick's Day.
to move forward on our next item, which is continued discussion and direction on personal use exemption of medical marijuana cultivation. There, I avoided embarrassing puns from, yes, Mike.
This is a subject with a lot of fertile ground for puns. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is an ongoing conversation we've been having. We've discussed previously an outright ban on a variety of marijuana-related activities within the town, dispensaries, delivery, and cultivation being the third major issue. The last time we discussed this, the council expressed an interest in creating a personal use exemption for the cultivation part of the town's ordinance. And that's really the focus of the discussion tonight. The ordinance is essentially drafted, and you've seen it before. What's missing now is how we define the personal use exemption. And along those lines, I have good news and bad news. The good news is the town has extremely wide discretion to craft this exemption. And the bad news is the town has extremely wide discretion to craft this exemption. This means that there are lots of questions to be asked, specifics to hash out, and issues to basically talk through, and that's the point of this this item, is to come up with some specifics for what you want to see. And then I'll come back with very specific language that hopefully achieves those goals and those policy objectives.
So if I could just quickly, before we go into the
Yes.
details, are you satisfied, because regarding the delivery component, because there has been previous discussion and some maybe difference of opinion, or at least direction to further investigate all issues of delivery. Do you feel satisfied that we've worked through all of that?
My understanding was that the council did not want to prohibit delivery. And if you want to nuance that or change it, we can revisit it, of course, especially when we come back with further ordinance on the cultivation aspect. But I did think that discussion was pretty... Did not want
Unless the council feels different, I just want to make sure that the council does agree with that.
I don't.
Okay, so let's just note that. We're not going to get into the delivery conversation tonight.
I thought when I read it that we had agreed that it would have to be for someone with a medical marijuana recommendation, and by either themselves or their caregiver. I
But
thought
there
that's
were
what we agreed.
there were some nuances to even that. Yes, that was fundamentally what we were talking about. A caregiver with multiple patients. There were some other things that we wanted to make sure we weren't unintended consequences of our language. So, but we can address that when we further evaluate the ordinance as a whole.
So just briefly, though, to touch on the delivery issue, the way that the state law is set up, in order for a dispensary to be able to deliver, they have to get a license that allows them to do so from the state. And the local jurisdiction would have to not prohibit it. So I know it's a double negative. You don't have to actively allow it. It literally is not prohibited. And so a dispensary that's delivering by its own rules and licensure would have to be delivering to someone with a recommendation. So it's not, when I say that the town does not prohibit delivery, that does not mean that you allow illegal sale of marijuana by any individual with a car. It means that you would essentially be allowing, by not saying anything, a dispensary with a state license to engage in that licensed activity. That's what that would mean.
Yeah, so let's put a Post-it note on that for our future conversation about the whole ordinance, knowing that we just want to make sure that we're clear on it. If there are still questions or concerns, we'll address those. But I do think that we want to address what you've presented with us tonight about cultivation.
Sure. And the whole point of this is efficiency. So if there is direction to be given on coming back again, I'm all ears. And my whole point is to try to not do this too many times. So if the council does want to give me as much direction as possible, that'll allow me to come back with what you want a little quicker. So I'm
let's
happy
at
to
least
listen to anything.
let's get through the cultivation issue. If it doesn't go too terribly long and we want to readdress
Sure thing.
any clarity on delivery or other elements, we can do that.
Okay. Very quickly, in the staff report, I began the conversation essentially by posing a number of questions. And these are intended, I believe there's 7 of them that I put in. they're intended sort of as a starting point for the conversation. Under each one, depending on where the council wants to go, there may be some sub-questions that I or your planning director will want to ask to make sure that we come up with something concrete that we can enforce and that's useful to the town, but also achieves the council's objectives. And I thought I would just go through these one at a time and try to engage the conversation and get as much direction on each as we go. But of course, if there's something you want to talk about out of sequence, let's go wherever you want to take the conversation. But the first question, essentially, and I think we've already heard some thoughts on this, but just to nail down the town council's interest in indoor versus outdoor cultivation. Do you want to allow it in some outdoor circumstances, only indoor, only outdoor, both, a combination? That's the first question, is where do you want to allow people to cultivate? And mind you, we're not talking about commercial operations. This is an individual in their personal capacity. So we're thinking this is going to be probably on a residential plot. It's going to be for their own personal consumption by them. So
I'll start that conversation.
Sure.
I remember that I specifically brought up the fact that we have very relatively small lot sizes and in close proximity neighbors and neighborhoods. And so my original opposition to any cultivation was in large part due to outdoor cultivation. I don't know if anyone on the council feels like outdoor cultivation is something to be considered, and if so, we can talk about that. Councilmember Durham.
Thank you. I've got a question, though, proceeding with all these 7 points. Who's enforcing this?
this would be town staff. So basically, the same way that you would enforce a home occupancy
violation.
permit or parking in of a commercial vehicle on a town street, it's going to be us sending letters, Ms. Liston's staff going out and taking pictures. Yeah, it's like anything else that you would have in your building or planning department. And I'll just point out one other thing. We actually cannot enforce it criminally. So this is something that's important to note. Criminal prosecution of marijuana violations is a whole separate thing, and our ordinance cannot be enforced in a criminal capacity. That was a...
I thought that's why they were here, so I was confused, so that's
So
fine.
So to that point,
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, was that, are you finished with your questions before we go to Councilmember Mueller?
Well, if I can make a quick statement about that question
Yeah.
then it seems to me that given the discussion we had about, I was all for vacation rentals when we were on the ZDRB having it, and that's why I asked for it to bring it up. And then at the end of the discussion, I realized why it wouldn't work in Yountville. And it appears to me this is the same exact reason. This to me is Airbnb all over again, with the size of our community and with these points and with our staff. So that's my comment.
In terms of enforcement capability?
Yeah, so therefore we leave what we voted in as is. That was, yes.
Yeah, the enforcement would start with a phone call from a neighbor or an email or a letter saying, my neighbor's got some plants in their yard, come tell them not to do it. And then staff would come out, investigate, take pictures, we'd issue citations, hearing process, and so on.
Very good. Thank you.
So Councilmember Mueller was next, and then Vice Mayor.
Okay, well, I totally agree with Councilmember Durham. I think this is just an incredibly sticky wicket, because if we're going to do this, I mean, we're not going to let somebody do it who doesn't have, this is medical marijuana, we're not talking about recreational marijuana, they need a card, we're probably going to have a permit system. All these documents seem to me that they would be public documents. So everybody, I can go and request a public document anytime I want. So if I go and demand, I want to know everybody who has a, marijuana cultivation certificate, that would be correct, right? Because everything we do is public?
Not necessarily. So an ongoing code enforcement operation is exempt from the Public Records Act. A completed one, maybe not, though. And then, of course, there's Government Code 6255, which lets us balance public interest of disclosure against public interest in non-disclosure. So let's say we had a file on people growing in town. I'm not sure we'd have to release that. But it's an open question and a good one to bring up.
Well, I mean, I just think that there are certainly, if somebody has a card There are places they can go buy it. They can certainly have their caregiver, bring it as well. I think that, we're providing access. We're not limiting anybody's access to this, to medical marijuana. So I totally agree. I mean, we're an agricultural community. There's renters and homeowners, and we're going to, what if the landlord gets upset that, we are allowing, I can just go, and that's what the state ordinance is doing. The state ordinance, the law that they just passed, they're going to take a couple years, but, this has been pretty slow in coming, and they're going to regulate potency. They're going to regulate, contamination. They're going to make sure that, what you're buying is really what you're getting, and they're going to work through that, and, they'll probably put a lot of, time and effort into it. So, how do we allow any old medical marijuana when they're going to have all these state controls? So, I agree with Councilmember Durham.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Well, if I go back to sort of the basic issue I had with it is that, we have an individual or individuals who have a medical marijuana recommendation. And by land use or by ordinance, we're going to disallow them from cultivating it themselves. So we're going to force them into the commercial environment, which we, it's like people who would want to be able to produce their own vegetables on their property. No, you can only get things from the store. I mean, I have difficulty in believing that that's a reasonable thing for the town to put the onus on the individual to do that. To say you can't do something that is for your benefit based on a medical prescription or recommendation, whether we agree with that or not. And so, I recognize the challenge in enforcement. There's just as much challenge in enforcement by saying we don't allow cultivation of it. We still have to have, there still has to be the nuisance observed, identified, and communicated. So, I guess all I'm trying to, ascertain or put here is, if the council's decision or direction is to not allow it, I have issue with it because I think there are people out there that actually truly need it. And taking that short, easy path to say that, well, no, we're not going to do that because it's too difficult for us to enforce. Well, there's lots of stuff we don't enforce in town today as the town. And I don't see us rolling over on those issues. We put them in an ordinance. So the council can take whatever direction it wishes or chooses, but this was a dialogue I felt that needed to continue. So whether we go through the 7 points or not, I don't know that we're going to bring this to a vote. We have an urgency ordinance in place. That decision can be made today. I assume probably not because it hasn't been properly noticed. But, we have this urgency ordinance in place. So why we can't have the dialogue is beyond me at this juncture, given that we all agreed that we'd have the dialogue.
Well, we're having the dialogue now, and we're not, there's no requested action tonight anyway, other than giving direction.
Correct.
So let's be
Well,
clear
as
about
we're
that. But,
asking-
yeah, I think it's clear. I want to give Councilmember Dornbecker a chance.
Thank you. I think that there are ways that we could put a structure into place that it then would become public and everyone in town would at least know. For example, in the first issue that you have is, do you want to permit outdoor cultivation or only indoor? Outdoor cultivation can create nuisance impacts from plants and strong and noxious odors. Well, that may be the case if you're, growing an acre of pot. I could hardly imagine that being the case if you are growing 3 plants or 6 plants or whatever, and we have the capability of restricting the number, which comes up in subsequent. So I'm willing to have the conversation, but I agree, the staff, we don't have staff to do the kinds of policing, and since this is a land use issue instead of a criminal one, I think that we're sort of, and given that maybe not in 2016, but certainly in 2018, this is going to be on a statewide ballot and may become commercial. I think that this is sort of spinning our wheels, personally.
So I'll make my opening comment. I don't think it'll be my last comment, but I agree basically with the Vice Mayor, the way you described it, that I've really kind of shifted my position on this over the course of our conversations, because I started out with the belief that we should prohibit all cultivation, because I was concerned about the ramifications of that. But also, I think the argument, Councilmember Dornbecker, that you were just making, actually supports the need to regulate cultivation. If we, as you pointed out, if we prohibit all cultivation, there's an even greater enforcement component to try to make sure it's not happening anywhere. If we allow it, whether it be by permit or some other mechanism, we have some level of control over who is allowed to do it and for what reason. One of the compelling points that you made in a previous conversation was also about not unduly burdening the person that has a legitimate and medically supported allowance for medical marijuana. The reason we shifted our language about delivery was to support that very issue. I think it does make sense that if we regulate this to a level of our satisfaction, it's better than not taking any action or taking extreme action, which I think would be the total prohibition. So addressing your first bullet point, I've heard testimony that outdoor creates a fairly noticeable nuisance. I don't know what the number of plants triggers the nuisance, but everyone has talked about walking by an individual that's been smoking pot and being able to smell the odor. Is that 5 feet away? Is that 15? Is that 20 feet away? And we've had testimony about the blooming season and the odor that goes with that. I'm not an expert. I don't know, but I'm going by that testimony that I would only allow or be supportive of allowing indoor cultivation. It controls the effects more than outdoor cultivation would allow. So the very first bullet point, I would say I would limit it to indoor only. There's some other sub-points of that related to living or non-living areas.
Another concern I might raise with respect to outdoor cultivation that a number of jurisdictions have reported is that it tends to invite criminal activity as well, not from the occupant, but from people who want the plant. And so people will steal outdoor plants. It's just much easier. So that's another aspect of the conversation for why outdoor grows can be a little more difficult to deal with, especially in a small town. So it's the odor thing, it's the potential for criminal activity. There's a couple of different possibilities.
Councilmember Mueller?
Well, just that I have a real concern about indoor cultivation. I mean, I think that all of us are I'm seeing some stuff about this. I mean, this is when you have to grow something like that indoor, it requires grow lights. It requires fertilizer. You know, we've seen people run a lot of electricity cords. It was probably in the movies or something like that. But, you know, we see what really happens. You've got these extra waste streams, electrical needs. You know, I'm concerned if you're a renter, you know, and these things, you know, it's like smoking in apartment complexes. It's banned a lot of places. You know, this stuff can really kind of permeate. There could be like, you know, a pregnant woman upstairs or some kids downstairs. I mean, it has so many different possible implications besides, you know, if we could really say, here's one guy who has a single house all by himself and there's not going to be these issues and he owns it, but we're really trying to plan something for a whole community in terms of, you know, an indoor pot grow.
So,
and, you know, so those are my concerns with really growing it indoors. It's, you know, it's very difficult. I mean, people might be growing it now. We're not out there searching for that, you know, so it's like if, in a way, we have a ban because it's illegal. You can't have more than an ounce, and a plant makes, you know, half a pound or something like that. So it's not like by having this, that we're saying we're going to be doing it, it's really something that we're really not really looking at now. So I don't know if I really buy that, but that's my concern, is that I would certainly hate to be a landlord and all of a sudden, you can grow, how many plants, and you change the electricity and dump, chemicals down the ground. It's kind of like having a little industrial operation kind of, in your residence. So I think it's complicated. That's my concern.
Well, I think to one of your other bullet points, limiting the number of plants is going to alleviate, I think, if not all, most of those concerns. I have a hard time, again, I'm not an expert, and it's difficult because I would rather be over-informed. I feel under-informed on the practice of growing and how much would be beneficial to a patient that uses medical marijuana. But I have a hard time believing that if we were to say 3 plants, that would be disruptive of an apartment complex and be a drain on energy levels and things like that. But again, I don't know those details.
Just a couple of quick points. To the extent we have concerns about use of electricity and gases and fertilizers and all the sort of accoutrements of growing, those are things we could address technically in an ordinance, and we could research with staff what sorts of concerns we have, and those are things we could put in. Again, the enforcement question is a little difficult, so you'd have to get out there and look to know if they've overloaded a circuit or if they're using CO2 canisters or something.
Right.
When it gets into the number of plants issue, just to jump ahead a little bit, I tend to favor a square feet or volumetric measurement as opposed to number of plants, only because they can be anywhere from 6 inches tall to 12 feet tall. A marijuana plant it's like bamboo. I mean, it can get huge like a tree. So limiting it to the number of plants can have a wide range of impacts. But if we choose a size or a shape of space, that might give you a better idea of how much of an intensity you're really looking at. But again, these concerns, some of them can be mitigated to the extent we can enforce those mitigation measures, just to plant the idea in your mind.
But like ventilation, I mean, normal houses really aren't set up for the required ventilation that you would we go to that kind of level? I mean, especially if you're going to have a plot, it sounds like, instead of a plant.
I think that would be advisable, yeah, to require that there be sufficient ventilation, for example, to avoid intensity of the odor, or we could look up sort of some industry standards or some other model ordinances that have described ventilation measures. But again, it's kind of a lot of options there.
So,
Vice Mayor.
I have a question. So if we were to, let's just say we were to put in place some form or function of the questions here and require that a permit by an individual be pulled, and that the space in which the grow is to be done in be reviewed by staff, wouldn't that accomplish both the exception that's being requested, or at least suggested, and give us the ability to at least control the size and the ventilation and the lighting and the electrical and everything else? I mean, isn't that part of a permit to do a project?
That would be one of the pros of having a permit option. There are cons too, though. I mean, they do take up more time. Of course, you can charge for some of that time. Mm-hmm. And I have some concerns, although not everyone in the municipal law world has the same concerns with permitting something that's technically illegal under federal law. I don't love the idea of giving the public a...
You're not ratifying that someone's doing it legally.
Well, kind of you are. I mean, you're saying from the town's perspective, we're allowing you to do X. And I think
it's like I have a building permit to do something under the pretense that it needs to fall under this specific guideline that the town has provided me as part of their ordinance. What I do in there, whether I'm growing tomatoes or medical marijuana, is really irrelevant to the town.
That is probably how we'd approach it.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? If not, I'll just go down the list here. I think you've addressed, and I support your concept of cubic feet. That makes sense. Having just seen a very interesting report on HBO about this very issue, they took the approach of small growers versus industrial, well-financed commercial enterprises that are popping up in all states, especially those that are allowing recreational use. There's clearly a significant amount of learning to be done on this issue. And I'll just further go down the list here. Limit cultivation to non-living areas of a residence. A lot of people don't use their garage for their vehicles already. I worry about a detached structure.
I'm fine with basements.
Basements?
There are none.
There are none.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We authorize all basements
Thank
to be
you.
eligible.
Anything in a room over a 30-foot vertical, which we don't allow either. I don't consider that non-living area necessarily a huge issue.
At least you guys.
It may be difficult in some of the, I know the mobile home park, that may be kind of a difficult question of if we were to limit it to non-living area, I'm not sure how we would apply it to those types of residences.
To stay indoors.
Right, if it were an indoor only, that's again a hurdle that we'd have to solve for.
Right. Distance from schools, parks, places where children gather. If we're talking about residential only, I don't know how prevalent that conflict might be. Certainly, we have some apartment buildings, depending on what the number of feet might
Depends on your
be.
distance, yeah.
Let me offer just a little quick guidance. If you use 1,000 feet, you're not going to permit practically anybody in town to have one, because if you draw 1,000 feet line from Veterans Memorial Park, Vineyard Park, Oak Circle Park, Yountville Elementary School, Vandeleur Park, Forester Park, and Yountville Community Park.
Well, we're not saying 1,000 feet or any number at this point.
I'm just letting you
Steve,
know
so-
that when we looked at that, that has, if you're trying to allow somebody to do it, and again, we're asking for your guidance to try to craft it, showing distance, because a lot of the potential areas where our residents live, they are immediately adjacent to the parks. That's all we're trying to say is this, if you throw language like that in, it could have a counterproductive objective. Again, we're trying to get clarity on what your interest is.
One of the other challenges we're facing here is, again, the unknown. We don't know if we're talking about 5 individuals or 50 or 500 that would qualify. We're assuming it's a low number. We have no real data to know one way or the other,
That's right.
nor any way to find that out.
Only one resident has really been very vocal, but that's hardly a cross-section of your community. I'm not sure what the level of interest or need is out there. And if we need to find that out, I don't even know how we would find it out. A community survey, or I was hoping by putting it on the agenda, a certain number of interested people would come and explain what it is that they need or want. That was part of the goal, but there may not be that much.
Well, you may be receiving your answer tonight.
Or they'll
That's
post it
right.
on Nextdoor Yountville in 3 months once we talk about it 2
Yes.
more times. So,
I haven't seen anything yet.
Well, since we're not really making any progress going down your bullet points, I'll just invite additional feedback to let Mike try to at least craft an ordinance that we can take action on in the future.
So I do have a question, thank you. So are there other agencies or municipalities that have crafted ordinances that are similar to or not inconsistent with what you have presented here, and can you give us some guidance as to who they are?
Well, at least in our firm, we've drafted a different one basically for each of the I guess it's 8 other agencies besides you, and for the most part, we're talking about Auburn, Grass Valley, Ojai, Calabasas, Barstow, Sierra Madre. Each of them has a slightly different approach. One thing that's common is if there's going to be a personal use exemption, it's limited to something like 100 square feet. Some of these issues about compressed gases, lighting, and ventilation are addressed in sort of a simplified manner that basically says it has to be sufficient to avoid any kind of buildup of odors or whatever. But it doesn't necessarily get too complicated. And I'd say that the distance requirement is something nobody among our clients has looked at, although many other jurisdictions have tried to impose something like the 1,000-foot distance. They're much bigger communities, though. So as Steve noted, it's not probably going to work here, but some communities do it. Unfortunately, there are as many approaches to this as there are communities. And what generally happens is a meeting just like this, the issues are discussed. In most cities, almost nobody shows up, and the council just sort of picks something, and the community deals with it. It's counties where people really have large operations and lots of vested interest, and things get really nasty. But Grass Valley, for example, has had ad hoc committee meetings with the community for months, consisting of 2 council members and the chief of police and the fire department. And they have been meeting with people, I'd say 4 or 5 times at least, before it even went to the planning commission. So,
And how do those communities deal with the enforcement?
it's exactly the same. It's code enforcement. It's complaint-driven, staff investigated, administrative citations issued. But these things are so new that there's not a ton of enforcement happening yet. Most of these ordinances barely have become effective. The jurisdictions with the most experience are counties. They've been dealing with this for a couple years now. And the experience in Nevada County, anyway, was that they had sheriff's deputies out with measuring tape. And that was their measurement, was a certain number of square feet of cultivation. And they had administrative citations. They had hearing officers hired. Our firm has actually served as hearing officers for some of those county abatement proceedings. And it's a whole separate thing. And this last month, I think the County Board of Supervisors in Nevada County voted to just prohibit cultivation entirely on the recommendation of the Sheriff's Department because they were having trouble with exactly those issues. So this has been going back and forth, and communities are having a really hard time finding the balance. So you're not alone in that. But unfortunately, there isn't really a clear trend that I can point to say that's how people are doing it, because everybody's approaching it slightly differently and having their own challenges.
So I'm going to take the position that I feel like there are still too many uncertainties. I'll speak for myself on this, to really feel confident in direction even, not even action. I think we need to get expert opinion and data. I would recommend a law enforcement representative to help us out. I'm not going to ask our sergeant to be put on the spot here and now, but maybe somebody from our sheriff's department. And I would also encourage, I know several of us know people that work in other jurisdictions, and some of us know somebody who works very closely in Sacramento in the medical marijuana lobbying field that we can talk to about what are some of these, trying to get more answers, because I just feel like we have a lot of questions we can't answer confidently yet. So if there's a way, I don't know that we want to create an ad hoc situation, but table this item for a future meeting date where we try to bring in a couple qualified experts that can give us different perspectives that can help us figure out what direction we want to go in. Is that, Councilmember Moeller?
Well, really, I think, I'm fine with continuing this discussion before we go down that far, because I think what I heard was about 3 out of the 5 council members really didn't have that interest in going down that road. So I think unless we really know that we have a very clear direction, that that's something we really want to do, it's a lot of work to find all that out. So that's...
I don't think it's any work at all to get 2 people that can come speak to their experience that live with this issue where we don't live with the issue.
So if you're talking about the issue, I'm fine with that if we're trying to figure out if this is something we want or we don't want for our community based on, some information from law enforcement who've have been dealing with it. If that's what we're talking about, if we're talking about, is that what we're talking about?
My proposal to the council for consideration is to invite a law enforcement representative and an industry representative come and educate us further on some of the answers to the questions that have been brought up tonight about what are the impacts of very small indoor cultivation. We're not talking about taking over a neighborhood or even a house. We're talking about a very restricted square or cubic foot space. But might there be ramifications of even a small grow that go beyond some of our interest in protecting the abilities of a patient who needs access, to not force them into a harder arena, whether it be a commercial operation or some other operation. So I feel that way. I believe that there's a majority of the council that wants to be further informed, but I'm inviting comment on that.
Well, if that's, I think I can, if we're trying to get more information, if this is something we want, or, the pluses and minuses or the challenges for our community, if that's the goal of inviting people in, I think that's something that, how could we not want more information one way or the other on the subject? So if that's what we're talking about, I'm fine with that.
Councilmember Durham?
I just want to go back to the fact, and one of the things I've always questioned since being on the ZDRB and moving over to here, and further, something I'm going to bring up for further discussion tonight is enforcement. And, just because we're not enforcing other things doesn't mean we shouldn't be enforcing this. And whether it be someone using their driveway as their living room or someone not putting the proper display in their window, because we have ordinances for these things, I still think enforcement is a lot of the things that we do in this community. So I want to make sure that if we were to do something like this, that we're going to play through on it and it's going to happen. Because in other places it has not happened. And it does nothing to, in my opinion, same along the lines, I'll go back to the plastic bag ban. It's the same thing. Let's make sure what we're doing is right for Yountville, and not just because we're the last ones with Marin Clean Energy or we're the last ones to do the plastic bag ban. If we're going to do it, we need to do it for Yountville. We need to do it right, and enforcement needs to be a major component of that. So I just want to be clear on that moving forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Dornbecker?
Well, I agree with you, Mayor Dunbar, that I think we would benefit from having a little more education on the subject from our law enforcement and also from someone we do know in Sacramento who works with the medical marijuana lobby to come and talk about, and I'd like to hear, about issues that they may be able to answer, like in different communities that have created ordinances, how has that impacted them in terms of, the level of enforcement and their staff and the time, and so I'd like to do all of that before we do something that makes a mistake. Plus, I'm really interested in the fact that we're doing this, and there's an extraordinary gestalt, I guess I think, happening that is pushing this state and other states to legalize marijuana, in the future coming up. So I don't know how much of this is we're spinning our wheels. I'd like to hear what the lobbyist says about what because they're probably got their, finger on the pulse of what's happening in other states as well. So I do think we need more information about it. But as Councilmember Durham said, if we do decide to do this, then we have to be able to follow through and make the commitment that we are going to. But I guess it'll be based on whether or not their neighbors turn them in.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I mean, I feel in a lot of ways I'm kind of the problem child here with this, because I may know people who have or use medical marijuana as a recommendation for whatever malady they might have. And whether they do it and grow it internally or outdoors is really not my interest. I know that they need whatever it is they need for whatever reason they need it. Not unlike why people use opioids and prescription drugs the way they use them across this country. And that we would not take the time to go through the process to determine what land use allowances or ordinances we could put in place, I think is short-sighted. And so I would encourage us to get whatever information is necessary to come up with something that we can apply and enforce in this community. And I don't claim to have the answers. I mean, I just would feel that we were not allowing someone the opportunity to care for themselves in a way that the rest of the prescription drug system seems to work today. And we don't have a pharmacy in Yountville. And I can repeat that. And we don't have a pharmacy in Yountville. So those are my only thoughts.
So my recommendation is to table the item and encourage staff, and I'm happy to work with staff on outreach to, I mean, we've talked about two targeted experts, one in law enforcement and one in the industry, I'll say, whether it's going to a lobbying consultant in Sacramento or someone else that may be able to identify answers to some of our questions. And then we bring this back. I don't know if 2 weeks is enough time to do that, but I think we should be looking at something.
It's not. We'll work
Yeah.
on putting together a program, because, you know, our goal is to try to understand what you'd like us to do, and clearly I think you can all understand right now we can't write an ordinance to help you because of the lack of clarity from the council, so whatever
have an
we
ordinance
can
in
do-
place.
Yeah, that's the
Well, I'm just
important thing
saying,
is that we don't, and it was clarified last time, is that we have
You have
a plan that's taking care of our existing condition. And now this is something that we're trying to project for longer-term
Right.
appropriateness.
The council is having thoughtful dialogue and consideration based on where you'd like to go, and we'd like to do our best to help you get there.
Thank you.
Is there any expiration or expected expiration for an emergency ordinance?
You mean the urgency ordinance that?
Right. Do we have to do, when do we have to do something by, in your opinion? year?
Arguably, that urgency ordinance has already lost its urgency. It basically was premised on the March, today's deadline that was removed by the legislature. Other than that, there wasn't much urgency that really could be relied upon. So when they took that away, frankly, I'm not sure that urgency ordinance is enforceable today. That's the first part of the answer. The second part, what is the urgency now, is entirely based on U5. So if it's correct that the urgency ordinance is no longer enforceable, then basically it's how soon do you want to regulate these issues? And the longer we wait, the more uncertainty there is as to what people can do.
But just to clarify, if challenged and the urgency ordinance is considered invalid now because the urgency element has expired, federal law controls everything right now. We have no prohibition on any elements associated with this issue.
I believe the dispensary prohibition is unaffected. So that was pre-existing, if I recall correctly.
Right.
So that's still in place and just as enforceable as anything else. It's really just the cultivation prohibition that we're talking about. So could somebody plant a garden today? Probably. Yeah.
In violation of federal law, but
Well,
unenforced at
right.
the state level.
Yeah, from a practical perspective, federal enforcement of an individual's marijuana patch is pretty unlikely, I'd have to say. But technically speaking, yes, cultivation, possession, sale, use of marijuana is a federal crime.
So it's not that we're exposed to some level of risk that we're concerned about. It goes back to what existed prior to our urgency action.
That's correct. I think the biggest risk may be that somebody plants a garden and later on you want them to remove it or downsize it. That's probably your biggest risk.
But the risk is no longer existing that we acted upon, which was the potential
That's right.
future local land use authority.
That's right. The original urgency was a deadline after which you would have no power to regulate it, whether to allow it, prohibit it, regulate it. You'd have nothing. They took that deadline out.
That's because
By they, I
every,
mean the
every
legislature.
jurisdiction was prohibiting cultivation.
Right. So that there's differing perspectives as to why that was even included. Some say it was a typo. Others say it was the lobby itself wanted it to try to preempt local regulation, and then it backfired because every local jurisdiction immediately regulated.
That's the one.
Whatever the reasoning was, they took away that deadline, and so you have as much freedom as you like to debate and inform yourselves and craft whatever you want.
Which was the intent of the urgency ordinance, to give us the ability and the time to think through
Right.
what is
That's right.
seemingly a controversial issue, not just in this community, maybe potentially even on this council.
So the distinction may be, though, that if the urgency ordinance were in place, then one would not be able to cultivate at all.
Right.
Whereas I think it likely that one could cultivate right now if they wanted to.
And people.
Okay, so I think direction's been given. I think as long as there's
Consensus?
consensus from the council, which I'm getting, that we continue to evaluate this, get some additional expert opinion on potential language, and revisit this at a future meeting.
And so I take it, though, that the information you'd like to be from a law enforcement official or somebody from I don't know how to put this exactly, but from a more regulatory perspective, as opposed to a Americans for Safe Access or marijuana lobbyist type person from the other side. So the lobbying group that
We
you
want
mentioned.
both.
Right. I'm asking, though, what type of people you want to come, because law enforcement isn't necessarily the only option.
I'm intentionally not putting somebody on the hook. We can, I think, as long as the council is fine with us, coming up with a couple sources of information that would allow us to have
To
a couple
balance the issue.
perspectives.
Yeah.
And we can put those people together.
And
Can we-
I would like, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Councilwoman Dornbeck.
I would like to add that since you referred to other jurisdictions which you represent and how they have crafted, if we could see some of that language, it also might help.
Oh, sure. And I could provide you with examples of them. They looked essentially exactly like the one you saw, except the original draft, except the exemption would say cultivation for personal use by someone with a card within these size limits. And you cannot use butane, CO2, and it must be
Well,
ventilated.
could we see that in writing?
That's it.
too? Thank you.
But it's very simple, and I think what you're getting at is that you'd like to know more about, for example, how big, how much space someone needs to grow, and how much electricity it uses.
But I'd
and-
also like to see that language.
Oh,
And,
sure.
If you could, just make a copy of it and let me look at it.
Councilmember Mueller.
So do we want, when we have these experts come in and what the town attorney's going to do, discuss delivery at that time as well? So have a broad understanding of people are, the issues with, calling Uber and having them drive around the street with, pounds of pot in their car.
Yeah, I
and
propose that we
stuff like
have kind of a universal review of the draft and vet as much of the two issues. There seems to be a comfort level with much of what you've already presented to us. There was some question about unintended consequences related to prohibition of delivery, but the main thing is the cultivation. I think that's the key issue that we want additional information on. They may be able to look at our ordinance and provide additional comment. I don't see this as a 6-month process. I see this as a phone call and an email and some feedback.
Right. To help us, what I'd like to encourage is if any of you have a specific question or a thought, email Mike and I, and that way when we bring our speakers, we can let them know that without identification, these are some of the questions and some of the thought content that you're looking for. Because, we need to get, we're hearing you want somebody that has practical experience about growing, somebody to talk about what the impacts in the community are, and the law enforcement impacts. So we'll put together a, maybe I may even suggested that as an early start meeting or something, and we do it as a workshop ahead of a council meeting, something like that. But Mike and I will work on that and with the mayor and come back with a program for you.
Okay, I think direction is clear. Okay, I think we've taken care of that item. Is there any further comment that's required at this point? And seeing none, not allowing any, we'll move on to staff informational reports. Thank you, Sergeant, for being here for that. And thank you. Popper Creek Flood Control Project update.
Good evening. Have good news on the project, Hopper Creek project, for the first time in a long time. Happy to report that PG&E will be on site tomorrow, barring some unforeseen malady, to remove the last two conflicts at 1905 and 1901 Fennell. So the contractor will then be able to place the final segments of pipe into the structure that is built at Hopper Creek, and that piece of the project will be complete. Weather permitting, that should happen sometime at the end of next week.
Except that after tomorrow, we're supposed to have a series of rain days.
Well, this project has been a bit challenging from the beginning, so why should it start going easy now? The good news is, as we've been saying, where they're at with this project is once the weather does clear, they can get to work immediately, and the dump site is an all-weather dump site at the Sire Quarry, so once the weather does clear, they should be able to get right to work, and they're anxious to get to work. If you've noticed this week, they've been putting in the 15-inch storm drain that runs along parallel to the road. They anticipate being at Heritage by Friday, so all of the homes between Heritage and Beard Ditch will be tied into that new 15-inch storm drain, and that piece will be complete. So this week hasn't slowed them down much, if any, at all. In fact, it may have allowed the concrete sidewalk contractor to get in a little bit ahead of what the schedule would have been to start that work, because they can do that work while Argonaut is completing the pipeline. So we may see some simultaneous work going on, which would be good. I will also think it's important to make note that after 14 months, the paving on Vista Vineyard Circle was completed today. So I know in particular the mayor and my wife, has been particularly perplexed on what took them so long. So it is now complete, and they will be continuing to add segments and more completion to that list. There's still quite a bit left for them to do.
Since I've complained about it forever, I was going to acknowledge, it actually looks good. They did a good job. They rebuilt that curb that's been broken up forever.
Yes, I agree. They're doing a great job. It just took them way too long to get there. So we're happy to see it finished. They still have a little piece of curb. They have some driveway to do on Girardi, and they're going to complete that as weather allows.
Well, they also fixed the patch right by Hopper Creek where the pedestrian path goes through.
They did.
They
Yeah,
fixed
that was
also.
if you recall, that was the first part of PG&E's work back in April or May, maybe June. So that was a piece of gas line that they cut off at that section, cut it off just on the other side of the creek, and then did that work on Forester and Vista to complete that section of gas line. I will also say that the fence at Oak Circle is now complete. Looks pretty good, I think. We've had some great comments. The ducks seem to be very happy in their new home, and the vegetation is going to be growing in well with a little bit of rain. Rain actually seems to help all of that new vegetation kind of grow just a little bit faster. So we're looking forward to a little bit of rain.
Excuse me, Joe.
Sure.
May I ask you, on that fence, Did I understand that you were going to plant something that will, disguise the wire on that fence?
We had not planned that. There is potential for that kind of fence, and it has been, there's several versions of that fence around town. It's not something that we had discussed.
Right,
It was mainly for safety.
The request on that was, we have landscaping, so when we talked to some of the neighbors, they didn't want to lose the visual. They felt that the narrow board would be too confining. So, I mean, I think when you see there is landscape material in the slope and everything, so people wanted, and again, there's lots of people, lots of kitchen chefs, if you will, but the thought was safety, but visibility, and done something in an attractive way. So putting vines back up, we can certainly, what I will say this, after a year or so and the landscaping takes shape, if there's something you want to do differently and we include a budget, we can come back and reevaluate that. But I do want to point out that there are significant landscaping, ground covers, and plant material on the internal slopes of those that really have, and most of the feedback that we did talk to the immediate neighbors, they just felt like it would be too confining and not attractive when you're walking right that close. So we were trying to work with the feedback from the neighbors.
Remark on my part.
Yeah, we're really, what we were trying to do was balance the need for safety after seeing how steep that slope was, and then still be able to kind of appreciate some of the work that's been done there with the landscaping and the new duck pond.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Next slides.
Oops.
So the next week's worth of work will be trying to get underneath the 14-inch water line that the vet runs up to the vet's home. That's probably going to take a couple of days in that little section. It's quite a complex piece of work. It involves placing 2 manholes, 2 24-inch pipes, 36-inch pipe coming out of each side of the other manholes. So that's probably going to take a couple of days. In talking with Argonaut today, but like I said, they anticipate being very close to finishing at the Hopper Creek structure by the end of next week if weather permits. That completes our discussion on the Hopper Creek project.
Before you go on, Vice Mayor, question?
So just one question on Heather Street. Would technically be the north side, the little retention, what was it, reservoir, whatever the heck it is?
Sedimentation
pond, thank you. I know, I don't know if Steve Rosa hasn't been out, but it looked to me like, that water settles there for quite a long time. Is there a mosquito challenge issue?
Well,
I don't know, I'm just asking.
Mosquitoes can breed in water.
Right.
So mosquitoes can breed in the creek. The sediment retention basins are all linked.
Yeah,
So what I will tell everybody, they're linked. They will dry out when the creek dries out.
Right, okay.
Their part, just like Villaggio Channel, Hinman Creek Marsh, we have a number of water areas that are seasonal. So these are designed, and if you actually look at the contour, for some of the people that have walked, you'll actually note the water comes out at once, it gurgles down. So what you'll see during the rainy season, we'll have ebb and flow standing water. Then it will, when it gets into April, May, it will dry out. So yes, the 3 to 4 inch deep part of the creek will dry out first, the sediment basin second. Over time, there will be plant material in the bottom once we get it in, so it will be less nuanced. And yes, we will be treating it just like we normally do. Napa County mosquito and vector abatement treats all of the public waterways for mosquito. Our Public Works Director shared over the weekend a very attribute, which is we also need all of our residents to be as equally concerned about all of the standing water in their own backyard, things like that that are all potential. But the public property, including the creek, these sediment retention basins are just an extension of the creek that allow for material to fill in, drop out, so that we can remove it and it doesn't clog further down, having a flooding impact.
Thank you.
I will add to what the town manager said, is that there's several methods that vector control mosquito abatement uses to treat mosquito-prone areas, including mosquito fish. They do spray. Anyone who's crossed Beard Ditch at any time in May or June. It's gotten wet feet. You don't even realize it's wet until you step in it. So we have a lot of marshy area that holds water. Sometimes you can't see it because it's a little bit grassy. That's kind of how Hopper Creek's going to be. And it'll eventually dry out, and at that point,
And just to remind, we have a lot of agricultural and water reservoirs, things like that, that are all water surface treatments that are all treated, including our own Rector Reservoir and Lake Hennessy.
Okay, I think we got it covered.
Like the sound effects there. That's good.
Yes. With the mosquito, that was the reason.
Yountville Community Park and Oak Circle Park construction update.
Okay, so this is a new feature for this council meeting. We thought it would be important to give you an idea of what's going on at these parks since they are such an important part of our construction season. Yountville Community Park, for anyone that's been up there, you notice that the trees have been planted. We talked about that at the last council meeting. They have now removed all the pea gravel. They have set grade with the new AB surface. So it'll give you, if you happen to go up there, it will give you a really great idea of what the TerraPave surface is going to be and how that surface is kind of plays with the bigger park in general. The contractor is going to be pouring concrete tomorrow at the north end of the park to replace some of the pavers that were non-ADA compliant. They anticipate, weather permitting, installing the TerraPave next Wednesday and Thursday. They anticipate it's going to take a couple of days to do that pretty big area in the park. They're also doing a little bit of drainage works for us, so the area that was kind of holding water or draining water into the swale area from near the bathroom, they've installed a catch basin there. We think that that's going to help with manage some of that drainage that has been problematic, and while they were there, they were able to do that, and they're going to pour all that back tomorrow. Next slide, please. I think we wanted to make a note that the town staff actually poured some concrete this week at Vineyard Park. So in the area around the basketball court, we poured two pieces that will attach the basketball court to some sidewalk. Previously, that had been identified in our ADA transition plan as being non-ADA accessible. With the installation of that path, town staff was able to now have that completely ADA accessible to those who want to get on the basketball path. At the same time, the area where the picnic tables were at, close to the restroom, we noticed that could use the same type of improvement. So we added a 5-foot wide piece to the sidewalk. We're going to install the picnic table so that ADA, a person with disability, can now access the picnic table, and we're going to also install the barbecue in an area that will be accessible to all people who want to use the park and picnic tables. We also poured a small piece of slab over where the bike rack used to be, and we're going to install a new bottle filler type of water fountain that seems to be a big hit everywhere we install them. So we've had a few comments over the course of this winter about the water fountain that's near the restroom. Unfortunately, that water fountain isn't able to be turned on during the winter because there are some parts in that are plastic and don't respond well to freezing temperatures. So the good news is with the new type of water fountain that we're going to install, it'll be an all-weather fountain. We're going to put a nice shed roof over the top of it. It'll have an area for posting messages, a bulletin board. So we think it's going to be a nice addition to the park, and it's all going to be done by town staff. So we're really excited that we were able to do that in-house.
We'll have a little dog bowl, dog water thing too on it.
We haven't ordered one, but we can look into that. That's a great idea.
People turn that little faucet on, there all the time. It gets kind of muddy. I just thought there seems.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
My dog doesn't drink on the road, but a lot of dogs do.
I think we'll look into that and see if we can make that happen. Any questions on Vineyard Park?
Was there any truth to the rumor that someone saw the initials JT carved into that sidewalk?
They were JD.
No truth to that rumor.
Okay,
although
just checking.
In my younger concrete days, it was
might have happened.
We also, I think we should note that the two, we have purchased the two mature oak trees, the Valley Oak and the Coastal Live Oak. They have been up in our yard for a couple of days. Now that the tree staff, our arborist is on site. They're going to grind out that pine stump tomorrow, both of those stumps, and we're going to place those 2 trees this week. So they're, with the help of the town arborist, we're going to place those 2 mature oak trees this week. So those trees, we estimate, exceed 20, 25 feet high. So that valley oak is going to be a really fantastic specimen for many, many, many generations. It's going to be a nice, it's about 6-inch diameter.
No, but where is it in the view
So if you,
corridor?
on the
North
path,
end,
so if.
The north
if
end?
where your place.
Where that pine tree that was kind of leaning a little bit on the path, that, in that location over where that picnic table, over where the other picnic table was, in Vineyard Park, if you know that area.
Thank you.
We don't have a slide of that. And then the second tree is going to go alongside the ditch, closer to the Holly side, Holly Street side of the park. There was a tree that we removed alongside the ditch there, so we're going to replace it about in that same location. And that's going to be a coastal live oak. We're also going to have
Joe, you flip those. The picnic tables, the coastal live oak, the one
Sorry,
closest to the
right.
ditch is a valley oak.
Thank you for correcting me. Correct.
Make sure that's reflected properly in the minutes.
Right. And
So they're going to be by, the tree's going to be by the new, or the existing grill and,
No, the trees are replacing the trees.
no,
that
I
were-
understand that, but remember, there was a little bit of landscaping maybe before you came, and some of the people who live in that area didn't want this tree here and that tree there, just moved over a few inches. I was going to say, if one's going to go on the north part of the park, but not near the ditch, just set it down for a while in case anybody has anything they want to say. You could always move it instead of digging it up, so.
Well, just want to
Good
be clear
idea.
that they're both going back in the same proximity where they were, because we talked with the residents. Everybody was concerned about not changing the view. We didn't want to put something in the way of somebody.
Okay, so
that's
you've
why
already
we're-
talked to the people who
we're
had a
very-
problem last
We're just
okay.
trying to use the existing in proximity to the existing so that we don't change it.
it also makes an elegant location, because once we grind the stump out, there's going to be a pretty big hole there, so it's already kind of ready for us to put it in. We're going to put some soil amendment in. The arborist is going to, because it is such a large specimen, we want to make sure we get it in a spot that it's going to be able to be relatively successful
And
and
did you
thrive.
say that's going to happen next week?
This week,
This week?
this week.
Good luck with that.
Anything more on
It'll
Vineyard
be
Park?
raining.
One more thing in Vineyard Park, so we are going to have an Arbor Day celebration. We are going to invite the after-school program and members of the council to help us plant a smaller specimen near the restroom at Vineyard Park. That will take place next week. Invitations will be coming out shortly.
Oh, nice. I did have one question about another tree, and that's the tree that's going to be, that was taken out of Oak Circle Parklet, the little park that you're creating up there. There was a beautiful mimosa tree there. Are you going to put one back?
If you remember, the council approved the project with a whole lot of new landscaping going in. The mimosa was in the way of the parking, and I don't have in front of me the actual landscape plan that the council approved, but plant material and trees go back in.
Well, please put a mimosa tree there.
If you could follow up offline.
We will
I'm
follow,
just saying,
I'll follow
the
up.
plan's
That-
already
that's
been
not
approved. The
official
council-
direction from the
Alright.
council. You can have a conversation with staff
Well, I'm
offline.
just
No,
sharing with everybody,
wonderful, beautiful.
the project's been bid and it
Right,
will be
okay.
built as it was.
So we're going to stay on task here,
All right.
please.
And we're on to Oak Circle Park, which was a good segue. So Oak Circle Park, the path will be, parts of the path will be getting poured tomorrow, and then they'll follow that up with the remaining parts of the path as soon as the weather allows. They are desperately trying to get this in before the rain sets in and kind of fouls the kind of work they've done already, since it's really all dirt out there at this point. They have made pretty good headway. They think that once they get this path poured, they've set the site up fairly well, so the drainage should allow for them to get back in without doing more damage than good. So look for that park to be, by the time we meet in a couple weeks, if weather allows, it should be well on its way to being what's going to be a final version. You'll be able to see a lot more of what's going to be the final park.
Okay.
Any questions on Oak Circle Park?
I think they've been asked.
All right. that'll do it for my presentation. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. The flood wall. I just want to bring you up on the flood wall. That painting will be complete on Monday. The contractor will finish up with some of the other work, the cleanup and restoration. We anticipate that project to be complete
About the third week of March.
third week of March. So that thing went really well. That break in the weather really helped us get ahead of the flood wall. So very happy to have the contractor have a sense of urgency and get that work complete.
Very good. Conditional use permit compliance program update.
Good evening. Tonight, we're pleased to share with you an update on our more formal use permit monitoring program. And as you know, the businesses in town are entitled to operate under a use permit, and on an annual basis, we monitor those. There are about 36 businesses in town. We used to do it more informally, and we would drop into a business, observe things on our own, and we'd have a casual discussion with a business owner. We'd also track their special events and activities and talk to them if there was a problem and things needed adjusting, or we would contact them in terms of a code enforcement. So it used to take more than a code enforcement communication with them. This new program that we've launched, we hope is more positive, and it reaches out to a business owner on an annual basis to start a discussion where we sit down with them, and we're finding that it's positive and that we're building good relationships with our property owners. So the way it works is we launched this back in November, and so we're trying to do a few of these each month. We mail out to as many as 6 letters to a business owner with their resolution and conditions of approval attached, so they are reminded of all those rules. We also share a form for observations that we'll go over with them during the meeting, and I'll share that with you here in a second, to give them an idea of what's to come. And if they conduct special events, we'll ask them to report to us on that so we can discuss it in more detail. And then we'll schedule a meeting within about 3 weeks. Some take a little more follow-up than others. And then when we meet, it's generally been pretty positive, like I say, but some businesses have been a little surprised. They may have been operating for 10 or 15 years or more without this more formal process. So things are changing, and we think it's for the positive. So this shows the form that we sent out, and these are the topics that we review with them. Their hours of operation. We also, retail diversity has a sort of a strong level of importance in this questionnaire because so many of the businesses are wine tasting rooms, but this is a general form, so this wouldn't always apply. When it comes to retail diversity, we find they're generally in compliance, but there have been some businesses that need to replenish more of the retail diversity, or they have to do a better job of somehow advertising to the public that some of the stuff is for sale. It can tend to look more as the decor of a tasting room, if not properly identified. It also gives us a chance to look at the landscaping and stormwater and the trash enclosure, all in terms of stormwater and what they're doing with these facilities. And these aren't necessarily noted as conditions of approval, but this is an area of rules they're subject to, and it's a reminder, don't wash your mats out in the landscape bed. The greasy ones from the kitchen, that is. So we also look at restaurants and tasting rooms and their number of seats and where they're doing service. We look at the signs and whether they're proposing any changes. In fact, one of our inspections this year led to an applicant submitting an application for sign modifications. We look at special events and parking management. These are probably 2 of the most important elements that we bring up with each of the businesses. And we're only just launching more of the stringent employee parking management plan. So we haven't had this full discussion with all of the businesses, but we're definitely moving in that direction, and we have had the discussion. We talk about outdoor lighting and ADA and noise issues, delivery trucks, and then ABC issues. And once we go through, we'll note any follow-up action that is required, and then meet with the business owner after that. Everybody signs off and is really satisfied. So what I think is fear on the part of a business owner when we first approach them for this more formal process. They don't know what to expect, but in the end, they understand that they're really operating under the terms of their use permit, and if not, they have suggestions on how to do things better. So we're really pleased to share this information with you, and of our 36 businesses, we've been through about 10 of them so far.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. I just have one question. What is, I mean, I know what point of sale is, but what's point of sale compliance? Is this to make sure we're getting proper tracking on sales tax and things like
Yes,
that?
because we have some businesses that do an order portion of the business. We just want to make sure it tracks from Yountville.
Right, got it. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Mueller?
I can tell you about the specific business offline, but there's one business I walk by and I go, wow, I'm going to go in and see how much that costs. And I'm told over and over, oh, that's just a window display. Oh, that's not for sale. Oh, sorry. When I finally said, well, what is for sale? It's like a little candle holder for $600. So anyway, I'll talk to you about that. I can't buy anything, and I go in there all the time trying to purchase some of the what looks like retail diversity.
Okay. Please do.
All right.
A couple
Who knows,
things,
they might be next.
Yeah, a couple things we wanted to, we're going to be doing a few more of these information because many of you have left themes, and part of it is we have to do some things differently, and we also realize that we have to share with you some of the things that we're doing and the community and the public for them to see. So this is a much more formal conditional use permit monitoring, along with other things. There are some things in the code enforcement world that are complaint-driven, but your staff actually is trying to work more programmatically on some of these themes and issues. So I will also point out I did take great pride in sharing to our local Board of Supervisor rep that if Little Yountville can figure out how to do a code compliance on 36 businesses that we issue, there's hope for the county. So they did express an interest in seeing what we're doing. Because I heard Councilmember Durham in his conversation, and I will also point out former Councilmember Dutton was always a good champion of reminding everybody, how do we go about enforcing this? And what's the practical? Because there is a staff resource constraint, and there's also a practicality. But I do think what's real clear is the community has an expectation that if the council is approving things and putting conditions, then there should be a compliance and a follow-up. So we want to let the public know there has been, we've taken it a step up, and then next council meeting, you're going to see a more detailed presentation on the employee parking management program.
Oh, good.
Good. I do think it's important that we actually show some structure, and also it was, I know it was intentionally casual in the past because it was kind of a trusting dialogue, but we really need to be able to record and document in case there are problems. So that's a good step forward. So nicely done. And get to those other 26 as soon as possible. Any other staff informational reports? Seeing none. No need to report on Napa County flood control. Unless Councilmember Dornbecker got another check.
No, I'm afraid
okay.
not.
Napa County Transportation and Planning Agency, all this very quickly share. There were a couple of things of note. I was pleased to see in our Go Green Team presentation that the new name of the agency, Napa Valley Transportation Authority, was included in that presentation. Impressive. Well done. Fellow board member.
To correct this item to reflect that.
No, it just happened, so I'm not pointing it out for that reason. I'm pointing it out because it was a pleasant surprise. And there is a new branding campaign underway, including a name change and some other cosmetic and substantive updates to the agency. Also, the countywide pedestrian study was released for public review before it's brought back for board consideration. And the never-ending good news about state gas tax revenues. The good news is we have almost record low gas prices. The bad news is that means we have a shortfall in revenues from the gas tax of more than $758 million. So many projects that have been put on the long-term list will be postponed or removed for lack of funding. We have one project, a PATH project, that is likely to be impacted on that, but the county as a whole is concerned about what projects may be postponed or pulled offline entirely. And that's only going to get worse. Are there any other meeting reports that we need at this point? Announcements, and I believe Councilmember Durham, did you have anything?
I do. And thank you to Vice Mayor Hall for his passion about enforcement. And speaking of which, the enforcement of the vacant storefront window displays is my concern, especially what's going on at Edward James Plaza with the Creamery. I think enforcement's very important, and so therefore I want to ensure that I read through the ordinance and I see what R&D has done on the side, which the art is nice, but then I'm also concerned that we're going to have art there for the next 5 years as well. And so I'd like to put up the point that I would like to see us revisit, given what's going on with R&D and given what's going on currently with the Creamery, that we have a discussion again about this vacant storefront window, because I'll be honest, I have walked by the Creamery for the last 6 days and tried to open the door, both in the morning and the afternoon, because I've been told that they're going to redo the windows. And I've also been told that, well, there's construction going on, but there's construction going on at the laundry, which has no bearing on this, and they're painting the building and they're redoing landscape, which to me, it doesn't affect the fact that they could either put the Creamery in or put up be held to this ordinance. So I want to make sure that we can be able to, I'd like to discuss this at the next meeting, and or contact Thomas Keller Restaurant Group tomorrow, figure out where we are with this, and let's make sure that we're doing this as the ordinance reads. So that's mine.
So I think those are two different things. One would be your request for follow-up from staff to check on enforcement and the appropriateness of enforcement, in particular at Edward James Courtyard. Then the other issue is, and I think maybe talking to staff or to Steve after the meeting about what it would take to revisit this and your particular concerns, and then we can discuss possibly putting it on a agenda going forward.
I will share, because if many of you recall in the Friday blurb, we tried to give you a short Reader's Digest version of the status of 4 properties that are subject to the vacant storefront. One section of Washington Square is in technical compliance. I don't disagree with Councilmember Durham's concern that we need to see what that looks like, and if I will refresh everybody, there is a 6-month refresh, not that I meant to use that way, but there is a requirement that it's not a static and it has to come back. There's a section within Washington Square that we're working with the purported tenant and trying to get their conditional use permit resolved, and that's ongoing, and frankly, we think they're stalling, and it has not. There have been deadlines and dates that have been promised, and it's on our enforcement. Our approach, very consistent to what you asked us to do, is educate and explain. Protea they actually are in technical compliance because they've actually pulled building permits. We are in touch with the Thomas Keller Restaurant Group and trying, they've been put on a work plan that they had committed to us on a timeline, and right now that has not been met. So we will be following up with them this week on what we can expect. So I do appreciate your concern, and that's why I wanted to try to let you know in that particular format that we were working on all 4 of these, and they're at various different stages of compliance.
I do think it's important that it's not what we learn from them about what we can expect, it's what they can expect from us. And
The
if
next
we can make
steps
that
will
pointed,
be following that, yes, sir.
yeah. Is that all you want to
One
cover?
quick point, too, in terms of enforcement, and it was my understanding that with that whole discussion with Handwritten, that we were all rediscussing and at some point wanted to revisit what open space is and what exactly it means for our businesses. But until that happens, Gerard has now pulled a wine barrel out with a POS station on the outdoor patio. I mean, it gets worse and worse every week. I mean, the fact that the staff didn't know that they had turnover now requires a manager or an owner to pull out a POS system out there, which I think in this case is an iPad. But I mean, it's just gotten blatant at this point.
I find that shocking because they're one of the businesses that we've completed our use permit monitoring with, and this was an item of discussion, so we will immediately be following up with them on that.
Good. Thank you.
I think what I will share for everybody, there's a theme that we're also concerned about, which is, and I think we're hearing some support from you, we try to educate, make aware, give them an opportunity to comply before we start doing the punitive, and I'm afraid that we may have to, with a few folks, go down some of that path and try to document and do that, because it does not appear that some of the folks are following through with what they tell us when we're there.
Well, I would support Councilmember Durham's point. I wasn't part of the discussion about Handwritten because I had to recuse myself, but especially as we're entering into the spring and summer months, we might as well get this conversation agendized sooner than later, and whether we may not have to worry about the enforcement issue if there is a different direction we're headed.
I'm just using the more generic enforcement, not specific to that issue, but the more global.
But that's another one for us to discuss about fitting on an agenda.
If you recall, it's also the topic, we tried to schedule a joint session with the ZDRB and the council. So we've got a short list of topics for you, and that happens to be one that we thought would be a perfect opportunity to talk with all of you. So
it might be appropriate then for individual council members to send you thoughts, concerns, questions about that issue as well.
But the idea is we try to have a conversation, and some years we're more successful than others, but you've supported that. We think with the current sign ordinance discussion, there's a handful of topics that make sense for an extended 2-hour, joint meeting, so that the ZDRB and you all can have some conversation and then come up with some better, they like to hear what you like them to work on, and then they get some direction from you, and we can work on that.
Right. Town Attorney.
I may like to just throw a quick note that if one of the 5 of you observes a violation that eventually becomes a code enforcement action, it may create a conflict for your reviewing that particular action if it's appealed to the council. So I just want to sort of point out that if you are part of the investigation and prosecution, you cannot also be the judge in an ultimate case on appeal. Just a word of caution.
Thanks for complicating things. Councilmember Dornbecker.
Yes, I have this little doodad sitting here. It's a little drone that my husband found in the entryway of our home, and it was sitting in a bush. Now, I'm pretty sure it's a toy that someone lost control of. But the point is, it could be a listening device. It could be, and I don't know where ordinances stand about drones within but I would like us to start thinking about and talking about what we're going to allow or not allow in terms of drones in our community.
It's interesting you bring it up. I've been talking about drones for over a year with League of California Cities. FAA regulates drones, correct, Mike? He's saying yes.
Yeah.
And we have very little control over it, if any. Is that true?
We have some, yeah. And we've drafted drone ordinances for other clients. I can circulate some models and some information if you're interested, and then you can let me know if it's something you want to pursue a little more.
If there is any local authority, that would be something I'd be interested in finding out. But most of my related outreach, it's up to the FAA and local jurisdictions have very little control. There are specific regulations and distances from residences and from public spaces like stadiums, and then it's all about enforcement.
I'll be happy to circulate some information, but that's That's correct in a nutshell.
If it makes you feel any better, one crashed in the lawn of the White House.
I know, but as drones also evolve, they could deliver, a payload. They could become weaponized. They could do a lot of different things. And I don't like the idea that somebody could plant a little listening device in front of my house, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
You can deliver marijuana probably too.
I was going to say here, they're going to be scanning your.
Now who's complicating things?
Thank you, Councilman.
So,
Well, it's only 8:45, so I was concerned. I'm more than willing to discuss it.
with a couple other announcements I wanted to make, there were more thank yous since we did not meet a couple weeks ago. I wanted to recognize everyone that helped make the, I'll use the proper term, Pro Football's 50th championship Sunday, which was really a super day. The watch party that we held here with the Pro Football Hall of Fame Foundation, and we raised over $6,700 for the Tug McGraw Foundation and their effort to research brain injury. So that was a very satisfying and a fun afternoon. Also, on the Monday after the Super Bowl, our 6 Hall of Famers went up and visited at our Veterans Home, and they had a wonderful time interacting with the residents there. And we also received from the Hall of Fame Foundation a flag that was dedicated from Station 10 in New York, a firehouse that was a first responder in the 9/11 attacks. They donated a flag through the Hall of Fame Foundation to the town, and we in turn donated it with our CAL FIRE partners to the Veterans Home for permanent display. So that was a very cool thing to be a part of. Also, I wanted to recognize that a group of residents from the Veterans Home worked all this last month of February on a series of Black History Month activities and celebrations, and they recorded many of them through their KVET news station. The culmination was this past Sunday when they had 2 civil rights, prominent civil rights leaders, Charles Black and Dr. Lonnie King, who were part of Martin Luther King's civil rights movement back in the early 60s, and were very instrumental in student marches and activities at Morehouse College in Alabama, or in Atlanta. Very compelling gentlemen that were part of a Q&A dialogue at the Lincoln Theater on Sunday. So I want to recognize all the folks at the Veterans Home that put those events on. And Vice Mayor, did you have something else? I thought you were searching for a...
Searching, but I don't have anything that I can...
Okay.
Thank goodness.
I'll come back to
Any other thoughts before we wrap this up?
I just wanted to ask, how was the attendance at that? I wasn't able to go on Sunday at the Lincoln Theater.
Well, we had close to 70 people, and we knew, or we being the planning group from the Veterans Home, knew it was not going to be a large audience, but they recorded it and plan on distributing it to all the other Veterans Homes throughout the state, and they have it on replay for the residents of the home that weren't able to attend.
That's good, and it was free of charge,
It
wasn't
was free, yes. But it was also the afternoon of, ironically, the afternoon of the Academy Awards, and so it didn't necessarily get on everyone's schedule. With no other business, we don't have a closed session. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment to our next meeting on March 15th.
Sorry.
Is there a second? More timely second?
Sorry.
Yes, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That is unanimous. Thank you and good night.
It's